Good morning, Rural Water. Hope everybody out in Zoom land is doing well. We're going to go ahead and admit folks to the meeting. And while we're doing that, just some quick things. We are here with 120 Water, Lowell Huffman, Jeff Bieberdorf, Steve Smith are with us. We're going to be talking about the lead and copper rule revisions, service line inventory, and best practice guide for compliance. Today's session is going to be from 8:30 this morning up until 12:30, and we'll probably try to get out of here a little bit early if we can squeeze out a little early. Depends on how much conversation questions we have during the meeting. Also, during breaks, we'll have 2 breaks. There'll be 30-minute breaks or 25-minute breaks, depends on how much interaction we have. We'll have 4 trivia questions during both breaks. So that's 8 trivia questions total. And the folks that answer those trivia questions will be winners of an Amazon gift card. Is that correct, Lowell?
That is correct.
Okay.
It pays to know LCR.
There you go. As for questions, we're going to be putting questions in the chat box today with such a large group. And if we don't have time to get to all the questions today, we are recording this. So we'll have the chat recorded and we could refer back to that and then directly answer anybody's questions that we didn't get to during the meeting. Also, before anybody starts doing what I typically ask, don't do this right now, but during the meeting, I will ask you at certain times, and it's only going to be at certain times, for you to put your name and your certification number into the chat box. 1 more degree of attendance that I have for proof of you being with us. If you are in a watch party, that means if you're watching with another person at a computer or on a TV or whatever, I'll ask also that you put in your name and your certification number during those times that I ask. Don't do that right now, please. I'll have a whole flood of chat box certification numbers and names that won't make any sense to me. If there isn't anything else, I think I'm going to turn things over to Lowell Huffman with 120 Water, and we'll get the session kicked off.
Well, fantastic. Andy, thank you very much. And good morning, Missouri Rural Water. It's great to be with you virtually today. I appreciate everybody coming on. I know we've got a lot to cover today. And you know, I'll just say that I know that lead and copper is a highly controversial subject, and it's very, very, very dense and dry material. So I apologize for the desert-like nature, but we'll try to keep things light and lively. As Andy said, we'll do a little bit of trivia for those that are listening or know or have been following lead and copper, a chance to win a little bit of money. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Jeff, if you can just confirm that you are seeing it, we're going to go ahead and get started here.
Can see it. Looks good.
All right. All right. Well, again, my name is Lowell Huffman. I am zooming to you virtually from Zionsville, Indiana. I am with a company called 120 Water. And we are going to dive deep into the lead and copper rule, what we learned on December 16th, kind of the journey here, and then breaking it down into some key components, and hopefully give you all some insights and some takeaways that you can start to build your individualized utility plan. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, please put your questions in the chat. We will also be, if we can't get to them live, we will be downloading the transcript, and we'll make sure that we get those things to you via email. So the final LCR revisions are finally final. I know, you know, this was passed by the Trump administration and put into the Federal Register last February. Obviously, the EPA opened things up for comment, which delayed the final, I guess, implementation of the law. And on December 16th, the EPA basically said, we've heard all the things, and we understand that while this is not a perfect law, that we are going to go ahead and pass it as it stands. So the good thing, this has been published for a while. 120Water, ASDOA, a number of great organizations. Your Rural Water Association has been studying this and following this. So the good news is the stuff that's been in there is virtually unchanged. So we don't have to necessarily go back to the drawing board. We've had a lot of time to really look at the components, the foundational pillars of this law, and we have a pretty solid understanding of what that means. Now, as you see on my screen, the EPA does intend to strengthen the lead and copper regulations. So basically, again, on December 16th, the administration said, look, as it stands, it's a better law than what we had, but it still has room to grow. So again, effective date for this is December 16th, 2021. That law is now active. We have until October 16th, 2024 to become compliant. We're going to talk about what that means and what are some of the things that we could be working on today to make sure that we hit that compliance deadline. I think it's important that what we learned on the 16th is that there will be some new rulemaking that's going to kind of flow in conjunction with the compliance deadline. So they are talking about this thing called the LCRI, the Lead and Copper Rule Improvements. Because of the comments that the EPA got from the different state primacy agencies and some of you all, they are going to be focusing on how they accelerate the replacement of lead service lines. Today, we're going to talk about lead service line, strategies, implementation, the key functions of the law. We're also going to talk about the funding that's out there. We are a resource-rich industry for the first time in a long time with a once-in-a-generational infrastructure bill. So they are thinking about how they accelerate lead service line identification and replacement, as well as trying to help us all understand and have the best foot forward when we think about the new sampling protocols. We are leaving the first liter, first draw for homes and multifamily units served by lead service lines. That's going to what's called first and fifth sequential sampling. We'll talk about that and what the EPA is going to be thinking about as they implement this new methodology. There's a lot of confusion around this 15 parts per billion action level and the introduced 10 parts per billion trigger level. So that will be forthcoming, as well as trying to prioritize historically underserved communities. So again, 120Water, your association, your primacy, we will all be tracking what the administration is going to do and how they're thinking about addressing those and what is going to be a new law called the Lead and Copper Rule Improvements. Additional actions outside of the rulemaking that kind of still, are still underneath the Safe Drinking Water framework are things like additional infrastructure funds. The funds that have been released and that are going to be released, and my colleague Marcus Hagberg is going to do an incredible job later today talking about how all of that funding maps to the different parts of what we're being asked to do as an industry. But that is just, I guess, the tip of the spear. We're going to need a lot more resource and funding to make sure that we eradicate this issue once and for all. And then, this whole concept of, addressing the lead testing in schools and daycares. It's a big provision. A lot of utilities and water systems are concerned. So they're going to be addressing those sort of things. But again, I don't want to belabor the point, but again, December 16th, this became a reality, folks. And it is not a revision. It's a whole new law that we got to learn. And, we got to put our boots on, get our best step forward and understand before we can take action, we have to have a really good, solid understanding about what's going on. And it really couldn't have come in a better time, because I think as we set up the frame today, it's important to know that the state of Michigan essentially adopted a carbon copy of this. After the Flint, Michigan crisis, the federal EPA really didn't take action. So the state primacy, EGLE, did. And they adopted essentially exactly what we're being asked to do. What I think is important to note here is that even with more stringent regulation, better sampling methodology, inventory, communication, all these things.
Shall I speak to Ms. Carey?
What you see on your screen still happened just a couple of months ago. The city of Benton Harbor even with, again, more stringent regulation, has declared a state of emergency because of lead poisoning. They had to truck in over 20,000 cases of water so people could make baby formula, brush their teeth, cook. So I think it's important that, as frustrating as this law might be, and some of the things we're going to go over today are going to be incredibly controversial, right? The fact that we are being asked now to inventory the private side of a lateral, going and trying to understand what that has historically not been your responsibility. The EPA is saying now it is. Sampling in schools, now your responsibility. So, but please understand that, this truly, we were installing lead pipes in this country like it was going out of style, like a good pair of Levi's acid wash jeans. We didn't know what we didn't know then. But we know now it's a threat to public health, and there is no known safe level of lead for human consumption. So I think that, again, a good frame of reference will help us understand why we're doing this. And I've got a couple of slides that I think will help. I also want to say, you're not alone in this, and it's not that help is on the way. Help is here. 120Water, other technology providers, the federal government has created a large basket of money that's going to be doled out over the coming years to help you. It's important that we understand all what is available, because just like when HVAC or plumbing or electrical code was updated, the tradespeople that are doing the work had to update their tool belts. And that's what we're going to have to really consider. But it's important that you know what's out there from a funding standpoint, from a technology and resource standpoint. So we're going to go over that. But this is something that, I want to call out, because what we're looking at here on your screen is a look at history. When we as a country identify an issue and take legislative and boots on the ground action, we create real positive change. What we're looking at here is a look at blood lead levels in the United States over time. Again, back in the 70s, we started to understand that lead was not good. It was leaching into the water. It was it's a very toxic chemical, or it's a very toxic substance that is a neurotoxin. And we began to take steps. Obviously, we went to unleaded gasoline. We started getting lead out of, we banned the use of it in water conveyance substrates. The Lead Abatement Act. In 1991, the lead and copper rule. Again, it was a response to an issue. Our public was being threatened by something that we didn't really have a good grasp on in the late 1900s, early 2000s, early 21st century. So again, when we take action, we create net positive, really good results that do what we want. We want to make sure that we're providing good, clean, safe water, and all of you do. It is the conveyance of that good, clean water that then becomes the issue. So how do we address it? So I like to say that legislation is imperfect. The rule in 91, I know a lot of people were upset about it. It wasn't perfect. We know now that it wasn't, and we've identified some gaps. But just like the set of tires on your work truck, there is a useful life that it provides good, safe transportation, gets us where we need to go. The law in 91 is no different, okay? That law has essentially reached the end of its useful life, and it's time to reiterate. It's time to move forward, because the results and the protection it offered has kind of plateaued. So here we are, the new and next generation of lead and copper rule. And again, I think it's unfair to call it a revision. In many ways, this is a whole new piece of legislation that, again, is over 500 pages long. It is incredibly nuanced, and there are caveats and pitfalls all along the way, which is why I think, again, it's so incredibly important. I think it's a big hats off to all of you that are here today to further your education and understanding, and for the association having us as a Sherpa or a shepherd to help you along that journey. But again, I just want to say real quickly, the reality of LCRR, the revisions birth and the delay that we saw, was really about how do we make this thing better? And, I think a lot of people were saying, what do you think is going to change? And, do you think that they're really going to make us do an inventory of the private side? There's no way. The entire discussion from the time that this was brought into the Federal Register last year until now is that this needs, again, under the guise of there's no safe level of lead for human consumption. In many people's minds, 15 parts per billion is 15 parts per billion too many. So it was really always a discussion of how can we make this more stringent? How can we eradicate the issue faster so we can move on to other things like, emerging contaminants of concern or other, infrastructure related issues that pose threats to the stability of our infrastructure. But I think this quote is wonderful, and I hope that this kind of resonates with the group today. When we know better, we can do better. Again, that's why I'm so appreciative of MRWA, all of you here today, wanting to know better so you could do better. So to lighten the mood a little bit, I say with that frame, like this beautiful, graceful gentleman, let's try to dive in here and have a little bit of fun along the way. Again, I know this is a lot of information. It's going to be a big brain dump today, but my hope is that this is, wherever you're at on your education and LCR journey, that you all walk away today with some things that you could implement in your day-to-day. So there are a lot of areas that we want to try to cover today. Again, we're going to talk about inventory. We're going to talk about some sampling, schools and daycares. We're going to talk about funding. But the biggest component, again, we talk about there's this big 10,000-pound elephant that's LCRR, and you try to eat it all at once, you can't. You try to tackle this thing, you're going to break your neck. So we want to try and help you think about this and eating this elephant or beating this elephant one bite at a time. Everything, I think it's important to understand that everything revolves around this service line inventory. The tier sites that are changing, the ability to effectively sample in schools and daycares, to communicate, to do replacements, everything is really tied back up to this inventory. But there are really, this new law is going to make, I kind of think my next slide says that, your job has got a hell of a lot harder. Let's just say that. But with sound and foundational understanding of what's happening and what's being asked, you will have the you will be far ahead of the game and be able to really chart your specific utilities path. Every single one of you are different with your resources, with your people, with the tools and technology you do or don't have. So there's no like one size fits all. Everyone is going to have to really understand, what is unique about my system? What is unique about my staff? How do I leverage those things to make sure that I have the smoothest road possible? It's not going to be paved with gold, but it doesn't also need to be like going over a uncharted mountain path either. We can make it as smooth as possible. So before we dive into the 5 key areas, I also, and I think some of you may have seen this in Milwaukee, but I think this is an important slide to just give a couple of minutes to. Again, history is a wonderful teacher. It tells us a lot about our habits. It tells us a lot about where we've fallen down or where we've succeeded in the past. This is a look at what typically happens to utilities when new legislation is passed. And what we're looking at, this blue line that you see, is the number of systems that are in violation of that new law, okay? And what we see is, like, whether it's total coliform or disinfectant byproducts rule, when something is implemented, like, either we don't pay attention, we don't learn enough ahead of time, because look, your day-to-day is crazy. You're in some cases plowing streets, picking up trash, trying to make sure people have clean water, doing main replacements, doing shut-offs, lock-offs, or unlocking things. And this is really no different than the OWIA stuff that got passed in 2018. We all knew it, but I've been in several conferences, and there's still, there were people waiting until the last minute, and they're not going to get it done in time. The challenge that we have ahead of us, folks, is that the lead and copper rule is like all of these that you see on your screen combined. In many ways, we haven't seen something like this since 1974, when the entire industry was turned on its head with the Safe Drinking Water Act itself. So the concern is, and the reason why we're here today and why we've been, educating for over a year, is that if we don't have people educated and understanding, the spikes that we have seen in past rules is going to be like minuscule. It could be 10x. We don't want, thousands and thousands of utilities in violation of this law come October 16th of 24, because then they're putting good money after bad and fines. They're behind the eight ball. All the other things, all the other critical components and projects suffer in that scenario. So we want to try and get ahead and avoid this as best as we can. We want to avoid this typical historical spike in violations. We want to mitigate that as best we can. So again, just a helpful frame on as much as you're probably going to want to throw something at your computer screen, or if I was in person, maybe scream at me, and feel free to, understanding what we're trying to achieve. And the fact is, this is no longer something that's hypothetical. It is absolutely a law and a mandate that we are going to be required to step into. So again, we're going to talk about service line inventory, some changes to sampling. I think one of the things that goes overlooked, but is seriously almost equally as important as the inventory, is this concept of communications. The way that you communicate with your customers is going to change forever. Your relationship with administrators and the Department of Education and your actual customers are going to change. We need to think about that. We need to have a game plan. We're going to talk about service line replacement strategies, things that we're seeing as we work with hundreds of systems across the country, and what we're learning from other great organizations like the Lead Service Line Collaborative, ASDWA, AWWA. And then we're going to talk about school and daycare facility testing. So again, the inventory itself is the crux of this issue. And if we're all sitting here looking at this thing saying, well, what the heck do I do? This is where we need to focus and understand where we all are in this inventory journey. Underneath this new law, every public water system has to develop a preliminary inventory due by December 16th, 2024, that includes material type of both the public and the private side. And you are going to have to use that to comply with the rest of the law, and it has to be updated with your regular monitoring schedule. I'll go over that in a bit more depth here. But again, you're going to get sick of me saying this. It is absolutely foundational to complying and being in sync with all the other provisions in the law. So what are you going to be asked to do? Again, all service lines, commercial and residential, and all segments, public and private. This has to be location-based. It has to be down to a physical address. You will see in green here, I put you can include unknowns. But there are some interesting definitions. Again, this law is highly complex and highly nuanced. And I want you to understand that as I've given these, I've heard a lot of people say, well, you know what, Lowell, if the EPA is saying that a validated inventory is, you can say you don't know, then guess what? I don't know. That's fair. You can do that and they will accept it. However, there are some things you need to understand about that specific type of strategy. I do not recommend it. And I'll tell you why. I'll later on, I'll say, hey, remember when I said that you could use your unknowns as a valid entry in your inventory, and I highlighted it in green. I'll come back to that. If you do have lead service lines or suspect that you do, and again, the way the law is written, if you do have an unknown, it is considered lead because it might be. So you have to create a lead service line replacement plan that includes that. So I'll go over that a little bit here later. Now, probably not necessarily on this call, but if you do serve a population over 50,000 people, this has to be made publicly available. That is a mandate in the law. I will say this, the recommendation is in this endeavor of complying with the law, show your work, be transparent, and communicate. Just like when we were in grade school and we were doing our math and we had to do long division and we had to show our work to prove that we knew what we were doing, that's a good thing. In this case, as you're developing inventories, I think it's a good strategy. It's not mandated if you're under 50,000, but you should consider making that available, showing the community that you are doing good work, trying to understand the conveyance mechanism so that you can keep them safe. Again, we are going to have just under 3 years to do this. And some of the stuff I'm going to show you is a bit alarming because that time horizon, three years, is not a lot of time based on what needs to be done. Again, I mentioned that this has to be updated. If you're on triennial sampling, you're going to have to update your inventory every 3 years. If you do it biannually, you got to update it twice a year. So again, I'm going to give these slides to you because I'm not going to read them, word for word, but there's some great information in here and guidance. Obviously, we know what a lead pipe is, and that is, like I said, regardless of if it's on the public or private side. But there is this thing called galvanized requiring replacement. That is a galvanized line that is downstream currently or ever was downstream from lead. That is considered lead and must be replaced. So create some issues. Now, I will say when we think about, and my next slide will show you what the EPA is mandating you put in your inventory. And your primacy agency is going to interpret that. They're probably going to give you some guidance on how the templates and the ways that you guys are putting this in. But I think as we're doing this, let's think about the future. Let's think about what we could be doing if we're going to be required to do this. How can we put our best foot forward and make sure that, whether we're going to retire in 5 years, that we're setting those that come after us up for success. So we think about, doing the bare minimum of what the EPA is asking us, but also taking the opportunity, taking this time and documenting absolutely everything we can. Because like we said, we didn't know, again, we were putting millions of lines in that were lead. It was cheap, it was malleable, it was a great resource. And it allowed us to effectively, connect homes to varying degrees of error on the mains. It was a flexible thing. It was great. I would venture to say, copper is a great substrate. It doesn't corrode like, other types of materials. Plastic is great. But what's to say in 25, 40, 50 years, technology, analysis, medicine, all these things advance and we figure out that those aren't great. Let's take this opportunity to future-proof our utilities, get everything, what we're finding is that a lot of us don't know what the heck is in the ground. And that creates an issue. So let's take this opportunity because it now is law to go above and beyond. So you are being required to document lead pipes, galvanized that are downstream or ever were, non-lead or unknown. So again, those are the 4 categories that you're being asked to do. It is our recommendation. And I know a lot of other organizations and associations are saying, definitely do that. But while you're there, let's take this opportunity to go ahead and get as much information documented. Let's think about digitizing this information instead of keeping it in silos that are only accessible by certain people so that we get a more holistic 360-degree view of our systems. So again, all galvanized copper, if it's not lead, document what it is. I told you were going to get sick of me saying it. The inventory is foundational for a number of reasons, because it's going to drive a lot of triggered actions based on what the EPA says. If you find it, if not, what do you do? These next 3 slides, again, I'm going to give these to you because I think they're incredibly helpful. These are different types of material combinations of the public side, the private side, and the connector type that under the required actions of the EPA talk about, replacement. What category do you need to put those in? In the new tier site structure, which we're going to go over, where do those fall? There are now 5 tiers instead of 3. We'll talk about replacements and what counts towards a full replacement or not. And what kind of notifications required. If you are replacing, and we'll go over this later, you have to supply a pitcher and a filter to that resident within 24 hours. So again, a lot of things are being driven off of what we find and what we're able to document when we put these things together. Aside from it being foundational for those reasons, it's also going to impact your ability to get funding. Again, we've got billions, tens of billions of dollars that will have to be spent. So having a solid understanding, you can't replace what you don't know. You can't ask for money to replace things that you don't know exist. So when we think about, how we position ourselves best to get the resources we need. The inventory is going to allow you to do that and allow you to tell a much more compelling story as to why you need money and resources. The graph that we're looking at here is a real life scenario of a system that we're working with. And what we are plotting out, this is not a here today, gone tomorrow thing, everybody. We're going to be working on this for quite some time. Tens of years in many cases to truly eradicate this. And again, the lead and copper rule improvements that the EPA is working on is going to try to accelerate this, but there's only so much time, so much equipment, so much expertise out there to actually get rid of 10 million service lines that are still in use today. What we're looking at, though, is a system that has a large number. They don't know what their system is. Their records were either destroyed, lost, never documented. And they know that through the last few years that they've found some lead, that they've replaced it, and they've documented it. So they know that we know we have some lead. We know we have some that's not, because we've either got it documented or we've replaced it. But this is what we are predicting from a standpoint of year by year, how much work they could actually do. Because what the EPA is requiring us is to identify and eradicate lead, become lead free, and be able to prove it. So that the burden of proof is on us. We have to prove the absence of, and it is going to be a heck of a journey. So again, everybody needs to buckle up. So when we think about building this inventory, there are, we try to break this down into 3 phases. I'll go into this a little bit more. Preliminary inventory. There are some wonderful things that we could do to set ourselves up for success. We'll dive into those. Once we get that, we're going to verify those things, augment, and then we're going to prioritize and go actually get to work if we do find it. But here's the concern that I mentioned earlier. The creation of this preliminary inventory for some of you is going to be, there are probably some of you that have really great records, or did an AMI or a meter upgrade project or a main replacement where you found some stuff, you replaced it, you documented it, and you know the majority of what's in your system because you did it all the way to the home. But for some of you, this is going to be a multi-year thing. And again, if we're looking at a 3-year, the EPA is not saying you have to be lead free by 2024. What they're saying is you have to have it. You have to, okay, sorry. You have to have your preliminary inventory created and submitted. But this process of doing that is a big lift for some of you, depending on what information you have or you don't. And then there's the whole, process of actually prioritizing if you do have it, or, if you don't have actual lead, but you have a big system of galvanized, if it's a loop system and you have some goosenecks or, pieces of pipe that are lead that are connectors, we've got a lot of replacement to do in those cases. So this is going to be with us for quite some time. So, all right, Lowell, Mr. Know-it-all, guy that knows everything about lead and copper, which I assure you I don't. How do I get started? Well, again, we're trying to break this down into 3 steps of developing your inventory, verifying it, and if you have it, you replace it. All along the way, again, I'm going to focus on communication. It's a big piece that's not necessarily explicitly written in the law, but in a few cases, but it's implied in just about every aspect of it. So again, developing is gathering existing information, trying to digitize that information. I'm going to show you some examples of what some really great innovative systems are doing to do this. Getting yourself ready for the later stages of LCR from a standpoint of school sampling in 2024 and first and fifth leader sampling, and creation of that. So as we do this, how are we going to be communicating with our residents and letting them know? I know a lot of you are probably getting questions. People are saying, are you delivering me bad water? No, we're not. It's the conveyance of them. We're trying to figure that out. We need to have a strategy to communicate that. Once that's built, we're going to go out and verify. There's a number of verification methods, which we're going to cover today. Again, I told you we've got a lot of stuff to cover. My hope is that certain parts of this are certainly going to hit that long-term memory. But for what doesn't, we're going to give you these resources. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how we're partnered up to support you over the long term as you guys and gals try to get your heart, your arms, minds, and really hearts around this concept. And then after verification, depending on what strategy we deploy, we have to then think about, replacement, sampling, and then obviously ultimately reporting that to the primacy agency. Here's a quick look at what a path to compliance looked like. Again, it's not a linear thing. It's very windy, and it's all going to be different for everybody. But again, the development of this inventory, getting the information, putting things together, using verification methods and strategies, verifying, deploying, whether it's, we'll talk about some verification methods of, sequential and profile sampling, customer campaigns, tele-engineering. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then obviously, depending on what we build initially and what we verify, then we got to go and get those things replaced and follow protocol as per EPA's new regulation. So what is this preliminary inventory made of, Lowell? Well, it can be made of a lot of things. So what we're finding is that when we talk with a lot of you, there's a big question mark on a lot of things. Obviously, we know very little on the private side, and that's to be expected. It's not been your responsibility before, and it's not your responsibility per se, but your responsibility is to document what the material is. Now, you and I, all of us, could sit here and debate that as soon as you touch the private line, it becomes your responsibility. I know a lot of you have stepped on private property in the past, and you redid their driveway, you did this, and they call back 20 years later and say there's a crack in it, or you did shoddy work. Those things are never going to end. But it's important, again, when it comes back to documentation and communication, so that you can prove that, whether it's a waiver or a limitation of liability, all those things are documented, and you can make sure that, you have a stable and very transparent communications track with your residents. But these things can be made of, again, I'm going to talk about how we can rely on records. The burden of proof is not just being able to physically see a plastic pipe or a lead pipe. We can rely on records. So what this is showing is, we can take tax parcel data, old compliance reports, tap cards, paper records, Excel sheets, billing information. GIS is a wonderful, wonderful thing if you have it, to all inform and build a preliminary inventory and give you a starting point. How much do I know and where are my gaps? That allows us to really focus our resources, people, and energy on where we need to go actually investigate. So here's an example of one of the systems we're working with. We digitized over 30,000 records, got all of that really good information that was analog sitting in paper form, loaded that into, and in this case, into our system, and then map that stuff out in a fashion that they were able to prove through records. And this should be accepted. Again, we are going to have to see what each individual primacy agency is going to accept. But my assumption is that there's going to be some leniency here, and records are absolutely your best friend. So it's important that we start thinking about, where are some of those records? Is it on a computer that people haven't been able to open because the password's been lost or locked? Did someone who was part of a big overhaul of your system, have they recently retired? It might be a good time to, buy some coffee and maple glazed donuts and sit down and say, hey, help me understand what was done in this big project, or what contractors did we work with? Do they maybe have records or purchase receipts of materials bought and implemented? There's a lot of different ways that before you ever get in an excavator or a hydrovac or step onto private property, you can learn a lot through records. And this is a little bit of a workflow, I think, that's helpful. It's like a decision tree of sorts that says, was your community built after the state implemented the lead ban? If that's the case, you don't have an issue of lead, and you can prove that to the EPA. You can prove that to primacy and say, look, lead was banned in 1986. My state, and I don't know, maybe Andy or somebody at the association, I'm not clear on when the state of Missouri banned lead. The federal government banned it in 86, but they gave states a couple of years to comply. But if you can prove that our state banned it in 1986 and the majority of my system was built in 1991, you couldn't have used lead unless you had like ties to the lead service line mob or something. But that is proof that you don't have lead in your system. Now, if you can't prove that, did your community stop? If not, is there record of where that was installed and the material type? So this will help you kind of hopefully navigate where you might be able to identify some records. So again, we are imploring you to try and shed some sunlight on your data. Again, GIS, contractors, plumbers, inspectors, real estate agents, paper records, engineering schematics, tax parcel data. You can infer a lot about things based on when, size of the lot, when it was built, the types of materials used. So the take home here, and I think, again, as we take this first step into compliance and tackling the inventory, you can rely on records, and you should. It'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of headache. And for those of you that say, you know what, we don't have them, that's okay too. There are ways that we can help and ways that you can still navigate a path to getting a preliminary inventory done. I would encourage you all to, if you haven't heard of the Lead Service Line Replacement Collaborative, they are a wonderful nonprofit. They have great information. We use them a lot, and they are incredibly helpful with helping people understand. These next few slides, obviously, I'm not going to go through, but these talk about the types of sources that you can go look for, what they are, where they might be, and what are some of the pros and cons. For instance, useful indicating historical growth of a system, but they may lack desired level of detail. So I've got 3 of these for you on, historical accounts where they may be, if you have, where installation records might live and where those, how those might be helpful, as well as construction practices. So again, some really great resources. These are from the Lead Service Line Collaborative. So you can, go explore on their website, or you could just take these and use them as you start to build your plan. Like I said, some recommendations here are, obviously, we're partnered with your association to help. Education is paramount here. So if you need help understanding, what does this mean to me? Lean into those things. We design them to help. Get to know the LSLR collaborative. Examine your existing information. Get a data management strategy. What this is asking us, and I was talking to Andy before we all got on here today. A year ago, we were all fumbling through the use of technology like Zoom. Some of us, me, still, I'm on mute sometimes and I shouldn't be. But look at us now, right? I mean, this was the way a very piece of complex technology. I mean, you think about what we're able to do right here, right now. This is a very cool piece of technology that we're using to learn and communicate and collaborate in the midst of some very uncertain times. But the same is also true for what is being asked of us in Lead and Copper Rule. It's important to understand, just like Zoom solved a very critical issue and allowed businesses and utilities to continue to get credits and continue to do the work that we do day in and day out, so is there technology to help with LCRR. So it's understanding what is out there. How do I implement a new type of strategy? How do I transform my utility to be more efficient and make better use of the time, resources, and people that we have? So I am sure a lot of you are probably sitting here being like, yo, this is a lot of information, and you're spraying way too much at us at the moment. Part of that is by design. There's a lot to consider here, and amongst all of your day-to-day and all the things that you have to do, it's important that we prioritize this. That what I'm trying to illustrate is the mountain of information that we have to process and consume, and we really can't wait. Now, time is of the essence. The clock is ticking in many ways, and the amount of work that has to be done is immense. So, I apologize for really kind of talking at you. Hopefully I haven't checked the chat, but certainly hope that there's lots of questions coming in. Jeff or Andy, we can take, I know we got 15 minutes before break. I've got a few more slides to get to, but happy to address some questions now if we have them.
I don't have any questions yet, but yeah, feel free to enter into the chat if you have questions and we can start answering them.
Let's go. either I'm that good or or people are just like, whoa, it's too much information.
I did like Larry Friedrich had just made a comment. He'd rather be in class, like to be more of a collaborative effort so you can talk about others about what they're doing. If it's not so much questions, if there's any comments or if anyone wants to kind of chime in on what they are currently doing, we're happy to take those as well and kind of hear about what people in Missouri are currently doing today.
Yeah, my hope is to do just that, Jeff. I trying to jump in and at least expose the inventory, some of those things. But yeah, this is a good time to kind of open things up for discussion. And if there are some folks out there that are trying to get started, or they have questions, or they want to share, I mean, this is a good opportunity to collaborate with your peers and share some frustration or some best practices, things like that. Would love to open that up.
We got a couple of questions coming in. Now we'll.
Good deal. And I do, I apologize that this is, again, part of this is by design, trying to just say, look, there is so much to this, and we really need to give it the credence it deserves, because this is nothing that's going to be learned overnight. But yeah, please send your feedback. How can we make these better? We certainly don't have it perfect, and we're always looking. And despite what I look like, I actually have some pretty thick skin. I'd love to take the critical feedback. But Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, Doug asked, does the submitted inventory have to be verified in a specific or in some way?
Yeah, so that is one thing that your primacy agency is going to be taking a look at, right? And here in a little bit, I'm going to talk about, like, the state of Michigan, for instance. They have accepted predictive modeling as a form of verification. So using computer generated predictions. Now, whether federal EPA or your primacy agency is going to accept those sort of things remains to be seen. I know Andy and the MRWA team will be working closely with your state primacy to understand, what they're going to allow. At today, and I'm going to go through some of these forms of verification that we know work. Again, data, existing records are one. Obviously, if you've got main replacements and you're out there and you can take pictures or get physical eyes on things, hydrovacking excavation. I'll talk a little bit about tele-engineering, where utilities are using campaigns to talk with customers to understand and validate or verify what's on the private side. We've got some really cool examples of that. Great question.
Thank you. I got another one from, make sure. Let's see here. Robert Nichols asked, when do you think the state will define acceptable documentation?
So there are some states that have already, rolled out some generalized templates, verification methods. It is our hope and our goal, in conjunction with MRWA, to get some comments or feedback from primacy. I think states are going to take, a number of months here to really digest and understand, given that there were no real substantive changes to the law from the way that it was proposed. I think that primacy, they have had some time to really think about it. And again, the good thing is not a lot of changes, but I still think it'll be a number of months before we see some clear guidance from, state primacy. But you can rest assured, as that information and guidance comes available, your wonderful association and hopefully our partnership will be here to help convey that to you.
Rhonda Barton had a good question. Does asking the customer suffice as a final answer for your inventory?
So yes and no. Yes, and depending on how you ask and what you get from them. If you ask them to go down in their basement or in their crawl space or where that line comes in and they can get eyes on it, and you can prove whether it's magnetized or with the lead check swab. Again, I'll show you some great examples. Those are ways, or if they can provide you and say, hey, I did replace my line when we did a remodel or we did some landscaping or we had a leak. Those are ways of, asking the customer and giving information that is provable of what that material is.
Awesome. John Phillips had a good comment, just kind of for everyone to back up a little bit and see his, that they are currently inventory utilizing Esri GIS to manage and create the geodatabase.
Yep.
Esri has a free template, which is based on Denver Water's model, which actually Denver Water is a client of 120. So it's cool to see that get mentioned there.
Yeah, so just to that point, it's all, yes, as I mentioned earlier, GIS is a wonderful thing. We have just here in the next probably few weeks, I would say, we're launching the Esri lead service line connector that allows 120Water and our capabilities to work with and through Esri ArcGIS. We've been working on this for a number of months, probably over a year with them, trying to figure out how we take that beautiful capability and technology they have to augment it and make it easier, better, and more efficient for utilities. So hats off to you guys. It's awesome that you're getting ahead of it and that you're leveraging technology and solutions to help make your journey easier, better, and faster.
Ben Weiler had a question, I think there might be one or two more after this. Where does the service line inventory and responsibility stop? Is it at the foundation of the home, inside the home, etc.?
So the internal plumbing, again, one of the limiting factors of the old law that I'll talk about here a little bit later is, first leader, first draw sampling is really only sampling, or telling you about the internal labyrinth of piping in the home. And if it's, copper with lead solder, in this case, it's essentially to the home's foundation. Once that is connected, and goes into the internal piping or the plumbing schematic of the home, that's really where it stops. But if there are continued exceedances, this is what Marcus will talk about a little later on, is that if the line is proven to not be lead, but there are still spikes or exceedances, the funding that's available is to help remediate whatever that cause is. That is more towards, that is not the utilities, but the utility can help convey those type of resources or options to the homeowner to help eradicate that. But and the way the law is written, it is from the main essentially to where the line enters the home.
Andrew Ferguson had a good question. Will there be publicly available resources on this from the government?
Yeah. So Marcus and myself, and we'll have some resource pages here. As those things come available, we're working with the association to have kind of a lead and copper rule place where, stuff from primacy, stuff from federal EPA, resources that we are providing all will be kind of there in a centralized place on the website. But again, we're happy to do the work or, find things for you if you need them. But yes, there will be a lot of information coming from state primacy. And we will give you some links as to where things exist on, general guidelines, overviews, those sort of things as it pertains to the federal law.
Mm-hmm. Another good one, Erica Baxter. I don't believe I asked this one for you. As a small system, if we have no idea what we have in the ground, are we going to have to dig up everything to see? And I think that might be a good opportunity for you to talk about, alternative methods to potholing.
Yeah, so a lot of systems are in your boat. So don't feel like you're alone. There's just a lot of places that records don't exist. But there are a number of methods that can be leveraged to do that without having to dig. Again, this is where things like predictive modeling can be a great thing. So the little information that we do have, whether it's publicly available through tax parcel information, you could leverage something like a predictive model to say, this is what we know to be true. let's run that through and make predictions. And then, instead of digging up everything, you could focus on, a few locations, validate whether that prediction was right or wrong, and then rerun it. Those things, the machine learning is beautiful because it actually, you can tell it, hey, you were right, good job, do more of that, or no, you were wrong in this prediction and here's why. 120Water, there's a number of different companies that have that kind of capability. But really what this comes down to is talking with someone, an engineer, talking with someone in our team, or circuit writers that say, hey, here is my specific situation. And some of the things I'll get in later are like, if you're a utility that has a lot of information, here's how you go about building inventory. If you are one that has very little to no information, here is a best strategy. So we're trying to bucket those into two types of utilities, those that have information, those that don't. And what are those kind of diverging paths on how you can most effectively get that inventory or preliminary inventory built. So we'll have some of those examples for you. And again, you'll have these resources after we wrap up today. Great questions. Thank you. What else, Jeff?
Let's see here. Doug had just asked one, is the testing for lead simply done when we submit our regular samples, or is there a special sample that must be drawn?
So I'll go over this here in a little bit, but come 2024, the sampling protocols are going to change. So first and second tiers, those are going to be ones that are served by known service lines that are lead or unknown. And those will be sampled by what's called first and fifth liter sampling. That protocol will be mandated. A lot of systems that we're talking to and that we've seen that are kind of ahead of the curve are doing basically voluntary sampling well ahead of time. Because this is changing, they want to know, and I'll go over some really great statistics. I know, again, this is kind of like, you feel like you're back in like biology or science class, but again, there's been some great research done. The state of Michigan, the state of New Jersey, as Jeff mentioned, Denver Water has been on a massive lead reduction program for a number of years, replacing over 60,000 lines. So there are some great, lessons learned that we can share. But I'll touch on those in a lot more depth here after the break and after we dig back in.
I know there was probably one or two more. Wes had asked, how do we go about inventory? But I believe you kind of answered inventory questions. If you want to dive, or if you want to expand more on just putting together an inventory, which are you doing that next section, or correct?
Yeah. So we got a few minutes. I'll just I'll address some of those because we've gotten kind of a cluster of those around these. So again, to a couple of those points, right? Are you a system that has few unknowns, meaning you've got a lot of good records, you've done some projects where you've gotten eyes on things and documented, and you've got 80 to 85% of your system documented, you have a pretty good idea, or you got a lot on the public side, you do have some private side based on some work that's been done. And in this case, what we recommend and what we think, what we've seen that's successful is that people can kind of over the next 3 years whittle down what remains in their system naturally, partnering with your city to understand what projects are going on, if there's going to be certain streets that are dug up or resurfaced, or stormwater type of programs going on. You can kind of partner up and start to whittle those out naturally. You can we'll talk about how you can use your customers to help fill what gaps you have. Now, probably the majority of you are where you have a lot of unknowns. And over the next couple of minutes, and when we come back, I'll talk about the different ways of actually going about getting that information without having to actually dig or hydrovac. So again, one way is, if you are doing meter replacements, if you have scheduled work that's being done, you could use that as an opportunity to go out and see what's coming in from the main and going to the home. It's a great method and a great way to get eyes and physical verification of what those pipes are. Obviously, potholing and hydrovacing, people have started to talk about the use of XRF devices, using radio frequency at a certain level to determine the material type. Again, customer campaigns have become highly popular, and we'll talk about some best practices there. Again, I talked about, leveraging existing partners in your community that may have good information on a home. There's a lot of ways that you can go about this. And again, we are happy to help share those, or, again, I've got Jeff here and Steve is on the call as well, that can share a lot about, the different folks that we're working with in and around your region or in different states that could help. Testing, voluntary sampling and testing can be a way of verifying, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But before we break, this is a really cool example. So I talked about tele-engineering. This is where utilities are using campaigns and outreach to their customers to help identify what is on the private side. So in this case, what you're seeing here is an actual flyer that was sent out to the resident with a 3M lead check swab and a magnet with some instructions, basically saying, hey, look, regulations are changing, and we're trying to make sure that we are, doing the best we can to understand what takes our clean water to your home. We need your help. So they basically say, hey, if you can go down to your basement and identify, and here, if you have questions, please call us. In this case, 120Water was basically outsourcing this program for them. But, in this case, this is a real life example. This customer went down, you can see on the left, where that pipe comes in. There's a quick, like a shark bite fitting that goes to PEX, but this actually, that pipe turned out to be lead. As you can see in the bottom left, if that little felt 3M tip, when you rub it on there, if it turns red, that means it's lead. So in this case, the customer did it. They went through, took the pictures, scanned that QR code that's on this thing, that was loaded into our system. And that is physical verification that that private line is in fact a lead line. So it's a really kind of cool, again, no equipment, no people, no field crews. This utility got about 15% participation. Now, some of you were like, man, that's not a lot, but it's 15% more information on the private side than they had. And it was a fraction of the cost. So those are just a couple of things. We'll dive into more of the sampling and how this is being used as a method of kind of understanding more of what's actually in there. Again, I apologize. I'm trying to ensure that, we're showing you examples, real life things, and also information and research that supports these things so that you can kind of take that back to your own utility. But great questions. We will find a way to make this hopefully a bit more, collaborative. And Jeff, please feel free to stop me, or Andy, please submit those things, or, interrupt me, please. But we will take a break. As Andy said, we do have in this round $100 for $25 gift cards. So for those, and Andy, I'll kind of let you explain how we want to do that for those that want to participate before we break here.
Okay, thanks, Lowell. So that was session number 1 of 3. We are going to take a break. It's going to be about a 30-minute break, give you time to stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, smoke a cigarette, eat a sandwich, whatever it is you do on break. Before you start flooding the chat box, don't start flooding the chat box just yet. Here's the way the trivia questions are going to work, because everybody is not speedy typers. Once the question is asked, the first person to put an X in the chat box is going to have the opportunity to answer first. If that answer is not correct, we'll just go for the rest of those X's. So put your hand on an X, and when we start the questions, be the first to put an X in the chat box, and you will be the one that gets the first opportunity to answer the question for the $25 gift card. Jeff, are you going to take over from here?
Yeah, sure thing. I've got a couple of questions here. So we've got 4 questions for this session right here. So yeah, before you stretch your legs, take your cigarette break, or go to the bathroom, you might get a chance to win $25. So my first question, I'll start off nice and easy for us. And yeah, we'll keep an eye, Andy and Lowell, keep an eye on the chat box to see who's the first person to type an X in there. But first one I have is, and then so we'll let you answer as soon as whoever we see the X. What is the compliance deadline for the lead and copper rule revisions?
We have our first X. Jennifer Johnston's the first X. Jennifer, if you would, unmute your microphone and turn your camera on. Jennifer, are you with us? You were the,
Here.
there you go. There you are.
Go.
Okay, so is it October 16th of 24?
You got it. There it is.
Okay.
What are you
Jennifer
gonna do with your
Johnston,
big
winner number
winning?
one. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay. Next question I've got. Let's do one. So this is not the LCRR, but what does the acronym LCRI stand for?
Looks like,
I think it was Mike.
I think it was Mike Huddleston. If you can unmute and turn your camera on so we can see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mike, I don't have a camera, but it was lead and copper rule improvement.
There you go.
Nice.
Okay. And that's Mike Huddleston.
Got it down. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here's a we'll see who got this one. So scrolling down, seeing who the last person was to make sure. Okay, so what percent of schools and licensed daycares will you be required to test each year starting with
Erica Baxter.
revisions?
Erica, can you
Does it-
unmute?
Yeah,
Sure.
100%.
You will be required to be testing 100%, but each year, so starting in 2025, what percentage of your total will you be required to test each year?
Oh, I'm going to say 25, but I don't remember that.
Ooh, very close, but no.
Okay, we're going to jump to the next. Mike has already won. We're not discounting you, Mike, but we're going to go to Jessica Price to give somebody else an opportunity to win. Jessica Price. Can you unmute? Oh, she typed in, I don't know. She was just ready to throw in the X.
She's just like X.
Nate, the next after that is Jason Lankford. Jason Lankford.
30%.
Not 30.
Well, in fairness, we haven't.
It's the minimum that's required. So I'll explain more. The minimum that's required starting in 2025, and you after 5 years you will have tested 100%. So how much each year will you have to test?
All right.
Looks like John Garner would be the next in line to answer. John Garner.
Yes.
You got
20%.
it. There you go. All right, and then that leaves us one more, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so let's do a pretty easy one. How much total funding is going to be available through the infrastructure bill?
Woo.
Karen Nelson, first X.
$5 billion.
Higher.
Okay, Laurie Perkins next. Laurie Perkins, can you unmute? Laurie Perkins typed in tens of billions.
That's not wrong.
What answer is that the answer you guys are looking for, or?
The total funding is 15 billion. So if you combine the two, yeah. 5 and 10s.
So who are we going to give that one to?
Well, who do you want to give it to?
What the first answer was 5, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, let's. I think Laurie takes it. Definitely tens of. It's over 10. So that.
Yeah,
we'll-
15
we'll
billion.
give it to Laurie
A
Perkins.
lot of money coming out there.
Congratulations, winners.
The price is right. That's true.
All
Here are, if I say your name, you're a winner. Jennifer Johnston, Mike Huddleston, John Garner, Laurie Perkins. You are the 4 winners for break number 1. And if you would, email me at abowman@mrwater.org. Your contact information, address, whatever, and we'll make sure that you guys get your gift cards.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now for the thing everybody's been kind of waiting for. I see some guys jump the gun from Consolidated over in Vernon County. Please put your name and your certification number in the chat box. That way we have one more degree of proof of attendance for today's training session. And that's when it's going to get really thick. So I wanted everyone to wait to do this at break during the certain time, so we can have time for questions and we can have time for your cert numbers. So thank you for accommodating that. And yeah, put in your name, your cert number. And I want to turn things over to Jeff or Lowell or both, or to the bathroom, the smoke break, the drink break, whatever it is.
Yep. Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you again. I know that was a lot. Go take a break, and we'll see you back here in about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. We'll see y'all then.
See you guys shortly. Bye.
Hey, another thing that I forgot to mention, if you're watching in a watch party, that means more than one person at a device. Please put everyone's name that is at that watch party and their certification number in the chat box. Thanks.
Andy. If you could turn the music down for a second. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful music. Thank you for that. I wanted to briefly, since we have about 10 minutes left, briefly introduce our Missouri representatives for, let's see, I didn't mean to pin you. Our Missouri representatives from 120Water, just to kind of briefly introduce you guys if you have any certain questions for them now, but more so just wanted to put some faces to the name that you'll probably see in the follow-up after the training today. So we've got here today Steve Smith and John Dawson. If you guys just wanted to really just say hi, you can tell them a little bit about yourself and here at 120, and we can keep it sweet and short.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, everybody. I think there might be a few handful in here that we've connected with already.
Yeah, you probably know a lot of them.
But just for those that are unaware, my name is John Dawson. Very excited to see the partnership building with Missouri Rural Water. And if, there's anything we can do, Jeff and Lowell are amazing resources. And myself and Steve will be happy to assist in anything that we can do to help as we move forward. So happy to meet everybody and hope you're enjoying your time.
Thanks, John. Kathy asked how the new baby's doing, John.
I was going to respond in Slack, but Kathy, we're 3 months old. We just had a baby bottle consult yesterday. No one judged me, but the baby would not take the bottle. And now the baby is taking the bottle perfectly. I don't want to say it's because of me, but I'm going to say it's probably because of me. But no, the baby's doing great. Everything's going well. Great memory. And thanks for asking, Kathy. Thank you for asking, Kathy. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
And Steve?
Sure. So John and I partner on the state for distinctions for the people on the call. John is calling on populations of 25,000 and up, and I'm calling on all of the smaller utilities, and there are lots and lots and lots of them. And I've spoken to a lot of you, but I'm getting around to everybody. And if you know somebody who needs to get help, please reach out to me, because there's a lot of people to talk to get this thing rolling.
Thank you.
And my oldest baby's 19, so I don't get to say anything else.
Thanks, Jeff. Enjoy, guys.
Thanks, guys. And now back to your selected music, Andy.
Perfect.
Whatever you want.
It'll be a different selection next break.
I'm excited to hear.
Andrew might be right there in chat.
You are going to get people falling asleep on the call if you keep playing this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I believe next break will be some classic rock.
Getting lots of suggestions. I like them.
I feel the urge to press an elevator button. There we go. Careful, Mike. You might get some polka.
I used to play tuba. I could the polka. I went to a Kansas City, UMKC for 2 years. And so I was out in the Missouri area for a little bit and played a lot of music there.
It's a good way to pay for tuition.
Oh yeah, right.
I was a music major, so.
Vocal groups.
Oh, yeah.
That's good, Mike.
Paid me to play solos. Solos, you couldn't hear it.
I know Lowell's going to be getting started here with the second session here shortly, but I just wanted to say we'll reach out afterwards, if, in case we don't get to everyone's questions, or you'd like to set up more of a one-on-one consultation time to, kind of dive a bit more into your specific programs at your utility with either Steve or John. So we'll have one of our teammates kind of start following up after that. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that will be coming your way. You'll probably see either a phone number come through from a 317 Indiana number, or the emails coming in your inbox. So keep an eye out for those.
And I'll also say, I'm trying to find the best method to really disseminate lots of information. I would really, encourage the feedback. I mean, making these more conversational, less like a classroom. It is a delicate kind of fine balance of, trying to really rake through the immense amount of information. But, if there have been things in the past that you've enjoyed, please share those. We want to be the best, educational partner possible, and know that, it takes some refinement. So, please either pass those directly on to us or to Andy or any of the team members, and they'll be sure to get to us so that we can make these more and more engaging and more enjoyable as we go forward. Now, there is some level of this that is just not fun. But, like I said, we can always improve.
Thank you, everyone, for putting your name and your cert number in the chat box. We'll be asking you to do that again next break, but at a certain time. So please don't just continually bombard the chat box with your name and cert number. I think we're going to turn things back over to Lowell and go back into the session.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for sticking with us. Like I said, I mean, the overall goal today is, again, to talk really about the depth and breadth of this law. And then in the end is to say, as frustrating and as much as there's lots of help. So, it's, again, uncovering some of the key components, the things that we need to be focused on or be contemplating or thinking about. And then, again, my colleague Marcus is going to talk about, if you thought the LCR bill or the law was a lot, the Infrastructure and Investment Act, Jobs Act, is over 2,200 pages long, which defines how states and how the money is going to flow. But I think he's done a really good job of breaking that down. So before we broke for break, and congratulations again to Jennifer, Mike, John, and Laurie on the trivia. I know a couple of those we hadn't really discussed yet, but that does show that a lot more about than what was presented today. So well done. Well, we talked a little bit about not only the changes that are happening from a sampling perspective, but how other states and other utilities are using sampling as a way of understanding better what is actually in what kind of materials are conveying water from the main to the home. So obviously today we've been very familiar with the first liter, first draw. And in 2024, that is changing. And again, I'm going to go over the tier site changes, but for tiers 1 and 2 in the new tiering structure, the new required compliance sampling is for first and fifth liter. That is where the first liter is drawn, just the same way it was. It's tested for copper only. The second, third, and fourth liter are essentially taken and dumped out, and the fifth liter is sent to go be analyzed for lead. And here is why, because really, again, we talked a little bit about, I know a lot of you have talked about, man, every time, I know this place doesn't have lead. I know it's plastic, we put it in, but we're still getting an exceedance, and based on the tiering structure, we have to test there. Well, that really, again, as I said earlier, that first liter is really only representative of the water in the home. And this schematic here, the next slide is actually, I think, a bit better, but when you're taking that first liter, you're only testing what's in the home. The second, third, and fourth liter probably, somewhere, especially on some properties, still is testing water somewhere in that home's labyrinth of water pipes. But that, fifth, sixth, seventh, and in some cases, like the city of Buffalo, New York, is doing all the way up to 9th liter testing, and they're getting some incredible results. Incredible in the sense that they're getting good data, but that they're higher lead levels, unfortunately. But here is a good look, right? So the first and second liter, testing essentially the componentry, like the actual faucets and the plumbing components inside the home. Now, what's interesting is that some systems are using this as a method to really test, again, what does the water tell me that's been sitting in that lateral line? Kind of interesting. Again, I know we're kind of back in the classroom here, but I think this is really interesting. So in the state of Michigan, they did a test of over 30,000 samples. It's a lot of samples. And found that on average, the fifth liter in their communities that they were testing had about 2.5 times as much lead in them. Now, there's a couple of different things I think that are important that we consider with that finding. One is that they had a lot more systems that were going to be out of compliance. And in this case, it was just about 2 times as many. And this small study, obviously went from like 16 systems up to or just around 32 or 31. But here is the interesting thing. So I told you in the beginning, the action level remains the same at 15 parts per billion, but the new law is implementing a 10 parts per billion trigger level, which is going to trigger you, the utility, to take action if that level is met or exceeded. So this graph here, while there's a lot here, I think this is one that I think is really important, and I think people should when we send this out, you should take a look at it and kind of make sure you understand what it says. So that red line that's going across is the current action level of 15 parts per billion. The yellow orange line is the new trigger level at 10. So this is a look at a utility that was testing a very specific home, and the bottom axis is basically what liter, what sample, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to the 10th liter. That first liter draw in this home that's been on their testing site for 25 years has always recorded a number below the action level of 15. It was around 8 parts per billion. Again, that site and that utility was not in violation. But look what happens when that second and third and fourth liter is drawn, and look what happens at the fifth liter. They trip that 10 parts per billion trigger level, which enacts, in this case, and I'll go over this, if you don't have corrosion control, you got to do a corrosion control study. If you have corrosion control, you have to do an optimization study. You have to, if you don't currently have a lead service line replacement plan active, this will trigger that. And it will also kind of do the find and fix provision, which requires you to take action and figure out what's going on. But again, that 6th and 7th liter, even higher lead results. So in many ways, this is the EPA and your primacy agency's way of saying, look, this is a better method. What we're finding is that in that 5th, 6th, up to the 8th, and sometimes the 9th liter, that is a better indicator of what the water is telling you that may be sitting outside of the home's plumbing. That's been a major issue that we've been dealing with for a number of years with these false positive results. Now, the fallout from that in many cases is that, and again, this engineer from Washington University in St. Louis said that we should absolutely expect to see a very large number of utilities that are currently in compliance with the old law that will fall out because of this new sampling. Now, again, you all ask, like, what are some different ways that I could, if I have zero information in my system, voluntary sequential sampling is a good way to start understanding, as a way to at least identify where areas of concern may be. So you said, do I have to dig up everything? Well, no. You can do customer campaigns. You can do some profile sampling. You could do maybe a hydrovac here and there. There are a lot of ways that can narrow that scope so that you can deploy different types of methods. Now, Roger, does this length of service line from the main to the residence determine the number of liters drawn? In this case, no. And again, as I said, what we're trying to do is take a federal legislation and apply it to 50 states with 50 unique geological makeups. We saw in the state of Texas when they had the big freeze that, their infrastructure is much shallower than a lot of ours here in the Midwest and in the Northeast. So it's an imperfect thing. Like in the state of Wyoming or Montana, big ranches, like this is not going to help a lot. But for a lot of systems that have, small, 500,000, 2,500, 3,000 people, where you have city centers and you've got, when city water and services were connected, like this can be a very useful thing. But Roger, that's a great point. This is not a perfect thing, and it's not going to make sense. However, you can use the information again. That study was done for over 30,000 samples. We know that it does help and can give you some information and some guidance that we have never had. The challenge, Roger, to kind of your point, where does the public and the private line stop? What this is helping us understand is if that water is sitting further away from the home and we get elevated lead levels, there's a heck of a high likelihood that there's something going on there and a good chance to investigate. Or, instead of, like you said, digging up or hydrovacing, you could say, hey, we did some voluntary sampling. We got the residents to help us out. We did some communication and outreach, and we found elevated lead levels in the 5th liter for these 5 homes. That may give you, you could use that information to make some other predictions or, again, areas of priority to really focus on. So again, we had a lot of questions about the different types of validation or verification. So there's digital, again, that is in that, data mining, record mining, finding out what information you have. There is the interior method. If you've got a resident population that's engaged and can assist, that's that kind of tele-engineering stuff I talked about earlier, where you can do some door-to-door inspections, resident surveys, photos, those sort of things. And then we have the exterior verification methods, which here, obviously, again, excavation, hydrovacking is becoming highly popular. Or you can go and take a look at the meter pits. Now, there's a lot of controversy. And again, the lead and copper rule improvements that will be forthcoming before 2024, probably sometime in the middle or late 2023, we'll talk about, what if we only replaced 6 feet on either side of the meter and you still may have lead or not lead? So there's, this law cannot possibly contemplate all the different types of combinations of, construction practices or replacement practices. But it is, the administration agrees, and the state primacies for the most part agree that this is a better version that helps us. If the end goal is eradication of lead, this at least is a step in the right direction, although we have some improvements and clarification to make. So service line replacement, again, earlier I said, here's what you have to do. You can't include your unknowns, and I put it in green, but I said, hey, one of the things I want to illustrate is just how nuanced this law is. And I know it's frustrating because it's, again, this just isn't fun. But if someone were to say, you know what, I don't know and I don't have time, or I'm happy to take the fines and I'm not going to comply, and I'm just going to submit a fully unknown inventory. Given that we know sampling methodology is going to change, and in many cases, 2.5 times the amount of systems are in violation and more lead is found. If you say, I don't know, and you say that is fair, and 2024 comes and because it's unknown, those will become tier 1 homes and you have to test with first and fifth leader. If you get a trigger level exceedance, you will have to replace 3% of that entire unknown inventory because it could be lead. The example here is, what if you took, a couple of months now to start going through or try to identify some record or talk to some partners and identify, and you found out that you now have 30% information, 30% of your system just through records you have information on. You would have reduced your replacement burden in some cases by that percent. So what I'm saying is, this law is designed to create action and get rid of a threat. And there are less loopholes and ways around things. In the case of exceedances and replacement plans, you cannot test out of those anymore. Before, if you got an action level exceedance, you could apply corrosion control, have 2 sequential monitoring periods where you were below the threshold, and you could get out of the replacement plan. Those loopholes, the tier site loopholes, those are gone, because the EPA has said, look, we really don't think scientifically or medically that there is a safe level of exposure. We got to get rid of the problem. So again, it's important, as painful as it is, and how annoying my voice and me doing this is, it's important to know how nuanced this law can be, and certain decisions about how you approach this could have downstream effects that later on can cause you to be out of compliance, or to really create a boatload of work that is going to affect your ability to do the rest of the things that you need to do day to day. So some of you, again, say, Lowell, I don't have a lot of information. I don't have records. I don't have time, and I can't go out and dig 1,000 holes. As I said earlier, you're not alone. And there are some ways that you can leverage new tools to comply with these new rules. But again, it is all about educating yourself about what is possible and what has been done out there. Again, I talked about predictive modeling. For those of you that have a very small or little amount of information, you can take that and you can apply it through something like a predictive algorithm. That, again, what you're seeing here is a screen from 120, but this is basically on the public and private side and the material type. And in the middle, you can see it says verified lead, 64%, 61%. Those are percentages of prediction of if that is lead or not. And that is based on a very small amount of information that the utility may have. So the cool thing is that this will output, places, again, for you that were asking, like, well, do I have to go dig up all these things? No. In this case, you could leverage a piece of technology or a strategy where you're taking that and saying, okay, and these areas, and this what you're looking at here, all those green areas are either verified non-lead or known non-lead. The red places are high likelihood, and you probably can't see it depending on your screen size, but the little yellow dots are in that moderate 50 to 60% chance. So again, instead of going on a city or town-wide excavation barrage, you can say, okay, in these specific areas, I need to do that. Now, the cool thing about predictive modeling is that, let's say there's 10 areas where there's likelihood of lead, okay? Let's say in 5 of those cases, it predicted it right. So you're telling that machine, that model, good job, go do that again and go do it more because you were right. In 5 cases, you were wrong, and here's why. As I mentioned earlier, you run that several times, and you could get to a point where you are like 95% accurate that specific location has or does not have lead. Now, as I said, we are still awaiting ruling from mostly state agencies, whether they will take this type of verification. Whether they do or people. So my hope is just like, in 2019, the state of Michigan said you can use predictive modeling. It is just as good as a record, or it is just as good as you seeing it. But regardless of whether or not they accept that in the state of Missouri, it still can be a very valuable tool, for your efforts when you think about trying to deploy a strategy and making sure that you're using your resources in the best, most efficient way possible. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of an internet issue here. Andrew, great question. So 120Water we provide predictive modeling as part of our service. Again, one thing that we know is that every system is unique. So some systems, are leveraging that for us. Some, are using there are a lot of companies that are doing this. But really, it's just about sitting down and determining, with a partner or with someone, what is the best path of action for you. But it is a growing practice, and there are, I think we've predicted over 300,000 lines with our technology, and we're getting better every day. And there's ways that we can actually apply some of our nationwide information that can help where you may lack that information. But that would be something, if you want to learn more, you can certainly reach out to John or Steve. So again, some pros and cons. Again, we're not clear if EPA or if the state of Missouri is going to allow it, but it is a great tool. It's a great thing to know about in case you need to put that in your tool belt. It's there. And again, 120Water is definitely here to help. We're partnered with your association, and we're trying to figure out and learn more about you all and the things that are unique to your geography, unique to your system, so that we can develop tools and resources and education that help you out. That is absolutely the goal. So we'll go through a couple more provisions. I talked a little bit about some other changes that I think you need to be aware of. One is the tier site changes. And before, there were 3. We've been using those for a number of years. They were not based on the inventory. The new tier site is 100% based on that inventory. So again, when we think about where do I start with the inventory, start going down that path, and that'll make everything else a heck of a lot easier. So this is a look at the existing or the old tier sites for single family, multifamily housing. Basically prioritizing known lead service lines or copper with lead solder. But here is the look at the new tier sites. So there's 5 now, and you'll notice that tier 1 and 2 are homes, either single or multifamily, that are served by a lead service line or by unknown, because those may be lead. So again, this is 100% now going to be based on that inventory. So before we can even, start to think about further compliance and sampling and all those sort of things, we have to have the inventory done, or at least preliminarily created, so that we can get these things established. Just touch on this again. Again, we are introducing a 15 parts per billion. We're keeping that action level. The new trigger level is 10 parts per billion. It will be calculated off 90th percentile. And again, once that is hit, it will, trigger the lead service line replacement plan, corrosion control, installation or optimization, and require immediate communication to the resident or those, depending on the level, to everyone in the system. So, again, these are small but really important. And again, part of the LCRI, the improvements law, this has created a lot of confusion. So they're hoping to give, to give some clarity on and around this. So I promise you, again, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. So we're on the home stretch. I promise you, as far as this stuff. And again, I think hopefully after we talk, at least people get a little bit of understanding of what this is. Marcus will tell you, again, I think that the EPA has taken a thoughtful approach to making sure that resources find their way down to smaller underserved communities. We've learned a lot from funding and infrastructure bills in the past. So one thing that I want to talk about quickly is the school program. So while this is not something immediate, this is not going to happen until 2024. I think it's important that we at least be thinking about, okay, I'm a community water system in 2024. If the state hasn't already tested schools, I'm going to be responsible for it. And again, we asked earlier, what percentage? So beginning in 2024, you're going to be required to do a minimum of 20% of those schools per year, so that in 5 years' time, you'll have tested all those schools. This is a completely new and different and more challenging way of sampling. And again, so this is all registered elementary schools built before 2014. Any registered daycare or childcare facility in your service area. And I know this is probably too in the weeds, but for those, it's going to be 5 250 milliliter samples in the schools and 2 samples from the daycare. Again, this is something that, again, when we think about communication, this is something that we all need to think about. Okay, so if I'm going to be responsible for this, how do I communicate this to my community? And understand that if someone says, well, why are you waiting 3 years to test my child's school? You need to be able to communicate, how what your plan is. And if a high school or if a different type of educational entity requests to be sampled, the utility under the law is required to fulfill that sampling. So, but again, these things get into, like, if media gets a hold of these things, this is where communication and transparency really are your friend. But again, we've never been challenged to think about these things. And it's important that, again, as we're, establishing step 1, 2, 3, 4, and on, that we know what some of the pitfalls or areas of concern that we need to address. Now, again, school sampling is a whole different bear. From, getting the plan together to mapping out where the fixtures are, getting those samples to the school, collecting those after the school has been shut down for a minimum of 8 hours, getting those analyzed. Those are big lifts. Yes, Lori, the systems will be responsible after 2024 to pay for those samples. Those will need to be sent, as I understand it, to a certified EPA lab. And there will be, again, under the LCRI, there's going to be a lot more information coming out here in the next probably 12, 18 months on the very specifics. And again, that'll also be monitored and ultimately passed down by your primacy agency. But, there are certain things that can't necessarily be walked back. Now, there was this thing called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act for the nation. It was called the WIN Act. That allocated a lot of money for statewide lead testing in schools. If there has been testing that is currently done or was done, that needs to be evaluated by your state primacy agency to see if in fact that methodology or if that testing will suffice or essentially be good enough for what is coming in 2024. But again, these are just mountainous issues that have come up. When people start thinking, it's like, okay, yeah, it is only January 13th, 2022, but I have to begin, if the state hasn't done testing, I have to have a plan. I've got to not only be able to sample, but I have to be able to communicate and make sure that, we're not going into this thing blind. Because again, education and especially kids are, especially susceptible to this. And it was the EPA's hope that, again, if children are the most susceptible, then we need to do a good job of actually testing and understanding where there might be threats to those, where they're getting water in those public education or private education scenarios. So again, I talked about communications, and Jeff, what time are we?
We've got about 5 minutes left, and then we'll have a break for about another half hour, and then Marcus, is that correct? I think, right? And then Marcus is on. Oh wait, no, sorry. I might be getting confused here. Let me grab my calendar. I think the break is actually, let's see, sorry. I was all over the place. So you're speaking from, I think you had started back at 11. So you still have another 35 minutes, 34 minutes now.
Yeah, we'll take some sampling required if the school can provide documentation that no lead, et cetera, was used in construction. So the idea is, again, if a K through 8 school was built after 2014, it does not need to be tested. That would be, Andrew, a question that you would need to ask your primacy. State to state, that answer is probably going to vary. Some, like I would say, like a California is probably going to require, sampling to take place. I know like New York and Wyoming, a number of states, West Virginia have undertaken actual sampling, but I am unsure if documentation of no lead components. Now, the challenge is that a lot of the actual components, that were installed in schools all the way up until 2014, even if it wasn't a lead line, may have those. So again, it will require some investigation on those parts, but that would be something I would take directly to your primacy agency and see if they can at this point give you clarity. My assumption is that they will probably say, we are evaluating, the EPA's recommendations, and they'll have to get back to you once they actually, formulate their plan on that. So again, one of the things, we've gone over a lot of the stuff: inventory, replacement, percentages, tier site changes, sampling protocol. Again, communications are only written in a few scenarios, right? So if a customer has an individual sample result over 15, they have to be notified in 72 hours. That's different. That means that you've got to communicate faster than we have in the past. If there's, after all samples are completed, if all consumers within your system have to be notified within 24 hours, so again, you get an individual result, you got to notify that specific resident within 72 hours, 3 days. Once all those are in and you have that, then you've got 24 hours to communicate with all people in your distribution system. That, is down from 30 days. And then, they do say, we want you to make an effort to at least once a year let those homeowners or residents know that they may be served. So if you have unknowns or if you have a known line, you have to communicate that. So again, there's like a handful of things where, you are explicitly written in the law that you have to do these communication components. What's not written is, all the different variations of ways that you're going to have to communicate about the work that you're doing. If you do have to do service line replacements, how you communicate that, how you get residents on board. If you're going to need their help in the acquisition of that information on the private side, a communications battle plan is not required. It's not written in the law, but it is a very, 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 highly recommended best practice of understanding, what am I capable of and where do I need help? Where can I talk to my association? Where can you rely on an engineering partner or 120Water or whoever it is to help you in that way? So Wesley, you said, as a small system, anything from the meter to the home is taken care of by the customer. So if the limit exceeds, as the operator, I have to replace it, correct? So again, in this case, yes, historically, anything from the meter to the home has been the private side. The law states that the inventory that you have to create, you have to say, is that lead, non-lead, galvanized, or unknown. If that home exceeds the 10 or 15 parts per billion trigger level, you're going to have to go in and investigate. Is that plumbing in the home, or is it a private or public side lead service line? In this case, yes, this, if that came to be a known lead service line through, examination, that would require replacement. And again, as I said earlier, a public side only replacement does not count towards. So if you get yourself into an exceedance situation where you have to have a lead service line replacement plan, Wesley, you have to replace 3% of your lines that are either known lead or unknown, and that's annually. And partial replacements will not count towards that 3%. It has to be a full line replacement all the way from the main to the home. Now, what Marcus is going to talk about here in about an hour is how the federal government is deploying money to the states to aid in full service line replacements. This is a perfect example, Wesley, of why communication to the customer is going to be so important. If there is an exceedance in the system at that place, and you do find it to be lead, it's important that you communicate to the customer, hey, this is, we found that this is a lead line, it's an issue, and we are required by law to replacement, and we need your cooperation. There will be times where you will get despondent residents that say, you're not stepping foot on my property, I'll shoot you. But it is incredibly important that, hopefully that doesn't happen very often, but it is a reality of the world that we live in, that there are those freedoms and those things. But you will need to be able to prove and provide documentation to your primacy agency that, look, I've communicated, I've sent letters, I've called, I've done door hangers, I've done everything humanly possible to try to get this resident to comply, and they won't. I replaced my side, I was not allowed to step on their property, and therefore this should count towards a full replacement. Again, this is where communication, record keeping, and centralization of all that information is going to be so critical for you to be able to prove that the work that you're doing is the right work, and needs to be accounted for and credited where due. So great question. So Mark, you said address the sampler. Currently, these compliance samples are not performed by the water system. Yeah. So for schools that are being sampled currently, or homes, if you're not doing them and outsourcing that, yeah, you would need to talk with those who are performing it. But again, for schools after 2024, beginning in January, if the state hasn't already completed school testing that's verified by EPA, either you or you will need to find a partner to help you actually do that on your behalf and submit that and report that to the primacy. So, this is where aside from the hard and fast actual changes to sampling, to the inventory and all those sort of things, it's important that we talk about your plan starting now on how you want to start communicating to your customers. We say communicate early, often, and loudly. A more transparent, more education style. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're addressing it. You probably have a lot of concerns. One of our partners, Mike McGill, who some of you may know, he has a company called Water PIO, but he says if they hear it from you first, they'll trust you first. If they hear it from you last, they'll trust you last. It is a very good practice to get out ahead of these things and start communicating early. As I said, tracking and logging these communications is going to be a key to success. It's infinitely important that your customers are educated and know what how you're going to need their help and their support and their participation in some cases where you have known lead and you need replacement strategies or plans in place. in many ways, you can't do it without them. So you have to contemplate, how are they a part of this whole thing, and how do we engage them? We surveyed a lot of you, out there, small systems. We asked, how concerned are you about meeting the notification timeline of 24 hours? The majority of people said, look, I'm very concerned. I don't have the people, I don't have a staff. I've barely made 30 days in those cases because of how much work. These are things that we need to consider. We asked, how are you communicating today? Obviously, a lot of things are kind of reactive. Billing is obvious. You have to communicate, hey, we're providing you with water and here's the rate that you pay. But fewer and fewer are using proactive education and initiatives. And we're trying to tell folks and educate them. It's important that you really think about a proactive communication strategy so that you can get the participation and the thumbs up from your residents, so they can help and assist you in a smoother path to compliance. Basically, what we're trying to say here is that proactive, positive, and transparent communication is going to be your friend. We've been part of a lot of lead reduction and replacement programs across the country in over 30 states. And we've never run across a program that was, made worse or wasn't better based on a very well executed communication strategy. So what I put in here are just some resources. Again, I don't want to go through these and belabor the point, but they are good examples and hopefully some things that you can talk about internally with your staff about the different ways and the relationships that you currently have with your customers, where you may need to get, and again, having that plan. The challenge is a lot of this is not explicitly written in the law, which makes it harder to keep as a priority. But again, as a best practice, as a recommendation, we're definitely saying, again, make it planned, make it proactive, and make it positive. On the bottom right here, these are different things that we have helped with. Those are actual customer campaigns, where utilities were sending puzzles and things for kids to help facilitate conversations with customers about learning more about water and the hard work that you guys do to make sure that they have good, safe drinking water, but also about some of the changing regulatory environment and how really both customers and the utility are kind of in this together. So those that do this ahead of time or in the process of planning for compliance, again, I think are many times light years ahead of, other utilities that kind of say, we just don't have time, or they kind of put it off until the last minute, and they have a less informed, customer base that really feels overwhelmed and therefore less likely to help participate or be part of a program. So again, a lot of systems don't have that kind of help. And again, if this is something that is making a lot of sense, and if any of you are like nodding your head saying, yeah, this definitely does need to be a part of it, but I don't necessarily have the expertise, never really had to really think about, public relations at this level, I would highly recommend, talking with, Mike McGill or any number of folks, or just internally talk to, circuit riders and some of your folks at the association. I'm sure they're happy to help. And again, we will be providing a lot of resources to and through the association in hopes of giving you those things so that you can use them as they make most sense for you. Aside, again, Marcus is going to go into a lot of this here after bit, but I just, I can't stress enough that while this is a major undertaking, we're being asked to do a lot and change the way we've been doing things for 30 years. There's a lot of funding, and it's not just the infrastructure bill. The American Rescue Plan Act that was, basically is like a $1.2 trillion funding mechanism for the state of Missouri. a big chunk of money in the billions came through. And this is, again, aside from that Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And again, Marcus will talk about this, but the government is prioritizing lead service line inventory and replacement strategies. It is so important, as I said on this slide, to have a clear line of sight. If you don't know how or what you need to do to get the funding to even start an inventory or to take action on it, I know, like you said, some of you are actively doing them. We're happy to help. I know Andy and Howard and the group are happy to try and help you understand, like, I know I'm going to need help. What do I need to do? But again, I think there's more latitude than we've ever had from a funding standpoint for us to actually go out and get that information. Some key takeaways or actions: start early, start now. Again, the first step, again, I'm so happy and overwhelmed and joyed that you all are here. Taking a moment to really dig in. Again, I know we're going through a lot of the granular kind of weeds of this thing, but it's important. So take that information, start early, start talking about it, talk with one another. If you need to scream at somebody, scream at me, and get that frustration out so we can, level set and say, okay, we got to do this. We have to, let's get busy. Definitely stay up to date. Again, as you asked, your association has a great content, great newsletters. Subscribe, make sure you're getting those. Engage your local and government, state, local, city government. They are being given the largest tranche of federal and state funding. You need to ask them what they're doing with it. And I would say, if there's ever a time to engage at that level, not only from a community standpoint, but your local and state officials, now's the time. The state revolving fund in Missouri, talk to them, ask them questions, ask us questions, use us and abuse us. This is, a wonderful time for you all to really leverage the resources that you may not have needed in the past. And I can tell you that, a lot of us are here ready and willing to help. So we certainly encourage it. And like the next 5 years are going to be critical, both from a standpoint of funding allocation to progression and learnings and best practices of all the learnings from your state and your peers and your neighbors, the things that they're doing. It is going to be a very critical next 5 years, starting today, starting right now. So here it is, right? This law is designed to find lead, and if we find it, people are going to want to know where it is. And again, we need to let them know and be transparent. And if we find it, they're going to want us to remove it. And that now is the law. And we can't do anything until we understand the scale of it. That's why the inventory is so important. That's why education is so important. And Andrew, you asked, is lead paint on a water tower a problem? So I've actually gotten a ton of questions from some of the training that we did in one of the neighboring states. And they actually asked, look, the lead abatement, and paint and those sort of things. Yes, I would say that, at some point that probably needs to be addressed. And I don't know what, state or local laws are on that. But like I know in my hometown of Milton, Indiana, proud town of 600 people, I remember walking my, water payment down to the clerk, but I remember when they did a complete strip and rework of our water tower because of lead paint. But Marcus actually, the funding that's available, while it's not related to distribution lead issues, there is a lot of latitude with the funding. I would certainly ask some of your local officials, if they could subsidize part of that $200,000 cost to get rid of that potential threat. Again, this is a stand that this country is making. We've essentially declared war on lead, whether it's in the conveyance system, or otherwise. And we've been on this warpath since 1972. So I think, Andrew, yes, 1000% definitely worth checking out. I think that, you know, you have the best chance you have right now to make a case and say, I know we've got some funding. You know, I am trying to take the most proactive approach of eliminating any potential risk for lead contamination, and I need help. Again, your state and your counties and your cities are being given, yes, John, that's a great point. ARPA funding just changed last week, and it is more flexible with this final rule. So again, this is why, you know, communication, understanding what your system's made of. This is a great example, Andrew and John, right? You understand where lead might be an issue. Once you have that information, you can work with, you know, your association, your state officials to try and, you know, build a narrative and a case so that you can go and get the funding you need to make those critical updates and get rid of those things. So again, if you don't, and again, you know, I think we're going to take back some great feedback on how we can make these better. And I can't wait till the next one, and we'll take that feedback and we'll make some changes. But if you walk away today feeling frustrated, I apologize, but take these things away. Everybody has got to do a lead service line inventory, every community water system. And it's going to be due December 16th, 2024. There is a lot of work that has to be done to get that completed. So, you know, let's start there and start now. You can embrace your unknowns. It is 100% part of what the EPA is saying is okay. But again, understand, remember the green and red lines that we talked about. Unknown lines are considered lead because they might be, and therefore are treated as such and are part of a replacement plan if you get yourself into that scenario. And what I hope you also understood is that with the changing in the sampling methodology, systems are going to be more likely to be out of compliance, which will trigger a replacement plan, which do include those unknowns. So just understand the nuance there. Future-proof yourself. Remember, we talked early, try to get as much information gathered, get it centralized, pull all those different things together so that you can do more efficient work now, and there can be more efficient work done in the future for those that are going to take over after you if you're on the verge of retirement. There's a lot of different ways that you can begin to future-proof yourself or set yourself up or do things now. Again, with this mandate, there's no way around things. So let's think about what we need to do and what more we could do while we're actually in the process of doing it. I encourage you to get a comms plan, a battle plan together. It is implicated at the very beginning, the middle, and the end, and even probably for years after. So, you know, start those conversations, start thinking about that today. Look for funding, as we just recently talked about, and with Marcus coming up here, lots of funding, different paths on how to get there, but it's important that you at least understand and can see what that line of sight looks like. You know, what forms, what things are going to be required, what applications. And if you need help, you know, find a partner, find somebody that can help you. Do you think funding will help with lab upgrades for local lab testing equipment? That is a great question, Mike. And Jeff, do me a favor. Can you send that to Marcus now so that he can address that when he gets on here in about 40 minutes?
Yep, I can do that.
When replacing known lead lines, do we know if we need to go through the foundation or stop outside? Again, so the interesting thing about that question, Lori, and it's a great one. So like when we talk with folks like in Texas or Arizona, a lot of houses are built slab on grade. And, you know, it very much depends on, you know, how and when the infrastructure was put in, you know, how homes were built. So I am not clear. And maybe Jeff, if we could take Lori's question and talk to Tom internally. Again, for these questions that I don't have a good answer to, Jeff and I will take these internally to some of our policy folks that we have here that can certainly get you that answer. My understanding, and again, I should probably just not say it, but would be that it would go to the foundation. But it depends on where the stops are, in your particular distribution system. Let's see, Rhonda. Will Missouri Rural Water have a communication template in the near future? Andy, I'll yield to you on that one.
That question will probably be best answered by Mark Klaus, our EPA trainer, Liz Grove, our management circuit rider, or Amy Diekman, which is new to the MRWA staff. Amy Diekman is drinking water circuit rider number 4 and deals with more of the managerial regulation items. If we do have a template in the future, we will probably send that out in an e-news, put that in our downloads online, and just make sure that everyone has availability that needs it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that, I've sat in on some things in different states. I mean, I know templates and communication stuff is starting to roll out. So I can imagine that your primacy and its leadership are talking with and evaluating other states. Again, one of the things to consider too, in all this is, in many ways, this is, as frustrating as impossible as it might seem. I mean, this has been done in a very lead-heavy state of Michigan for almost 4 years. So there's a lot that we've learned. There's a lot of great stuff that your primacy and your association can learn. And again, this rule has been published for well over a year. So my hope is that, very quickly, those resources, those things will be coming to you again, so that as you all begin to really bring into focus your individual plan, that you'll know exactly where to go, where to reach, what to grab, and what not to. Again, here as we close up for our second session, as we go into break, again, I just wanted to say, hey, we are certainly here to help and to educate, and this is not something where it's like, you talk to 120Water, you have to do anything. That's not the case. Our partnership is designed to help with education. I mean, we're providing resources, compliance timelines, funding timelines, evaluation forms, templates, all those different things we're doing in conjunction with your amazing association and the great leadership that they have. So again, we're here. Use us and abuse us as much as you want. And again, there's nothing that you have to do other than ask, and we'll be happy to help you, whether or not you work with us in a formal capacity. Our founder and CEO Megan Glover, an amazing human being, challenged me to help. And for those of you that don't know me, I spent about 11 years working for the National Hardware Association. We represented about 30,000 hardware stores all over the country that are independently operated. And, she said, Lowell, I really want you to help and partner with associations and help them. It is our goal to educate tens of thousands of people. Because again, this industry hasn't seen something this big and this wild and kind of crazy in a lot of our lifetimes. So our goal is to help and educate, and if we can be of assistance beyond that, great. If not, great. This partnership is designed. It begins, the middle, and the end is all about education. And again, I want to get better. We want to get better at this. So please, any feedback that you have is welcome and encouraged, and we'll definitely make these better. Thank you, Jeff, for putting that in there on the SRF. So again, you got me, you got Jeff, John, and Steve that you met earlier. We're all here, and we've got a great team behind us. We've got policy experts. We've got some association help and guidance. We're bringing on more folks, and we're happy to deploy any and all that we can to help you in your journey. We know it's a lot, and again, we tip our caps to you all that are here, dedicated. I know, again, this is like going back to high school or college, or being in a classroom. But, we appreciate the opportunity to walk through some of these things with you. And like I said, questions, comments, feedback, concerns, help us be better to help you better. And just remember, when we know better, we can do better. And that is a wonderful, wonderful theme that has helped march this industry forward for a long, long time. So I'll obviously take questions, or I'll hand it over to Andy to give us a break, and then obviously we will have 4 more questions for a chance to win some more Amazon cash.
Who's up to win?
Which, by the way, when I was at the Hardware Association, Amazon was not a big positive thing. Amazon, Home Depot, and Lowe's, they were really kind of the big monster as it pertains to small hardware stores. But fun fact, 36,000 hardware stores in the country, and there's only 14,000 McDonald's. Kind of crazy. So, but definitely a chance to win, and we will support Amazon in this case.
Somebody had to build those McDonald's.
Absolutely.
You can always buy from a small business who maybe is advertising on Amazon. Use it that way.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we are going to our second and final break of this morning. Again, we're going to have our trivia questions first before we go into break. And in order to answer those questions, instead of typing in your answer or trying to unmute and shout your answer out, we're going to have you put an X in the chat. The first person to put their X in the chat will be the first person that we ask the answer. And then so forth and so on if the first person's incorrect, just like last break. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the trivia questions.
All right. And then there was a quick question from George. If you could, Lowell, put up the contact info. That way, if people want to take down our team's info, they can. But yeah, the first one I've got. Okay, let's see here. What are the new action and trigger levels?
Looks like Brian Meyer was the first to X in. Brian, can you hear us? Can you unmute?
That was lightning fast.
At this point, you just gotta maybe just spam the X and hope that you're the first one, and then help you know the answer.
Brian Meyer, can you give us the answer to that question? I'll either need you to type in your answer or you need to speak it. Brian Meyer going once. Brian Meyer going twice. Brian Meyer, we've skipped you. Oh, look at that, just in the nick of time.
Is that a typo?
Is that a typo or yeah?
Or final answer?
Let's see. And please refrain from putting your name and your cert number. Don't do that yet. Brian Meyer's answer was 10 ppl, 115 ppb.
So that is not correct. But I'm wondering if Jennifer XX. I know.
Let's jump to Andrew Ferguson. Andrew Ferguson, if you can hear us, please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, he probably typoed it, but it was a 10 parts per billion trigger level and a 15 part per billion action level.
There you go.
Absolutely. Well done.
Sorry, Brian. And congrats, Andrew.
Thanks.
All right. Next question. So under the new revisions, everyone is going to be required to have their service line inventory publicly available. At what population size that you're serving does it have to be publicly available online?
Wow. Roger Ballou, looks like you're the first one to X in. And you just have to click to unmute. I'm looking at you.
I believe that is 50,000, if that is
There you go. You got it.
All right.
Congrats, Roger. Lightning speed too.
Roger knows his stuff.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so if you replace a resident's lead service line, what has to be delivered to the resident within 24 hours?
Ooh, good question.
Was that Lori Perkins, Jennifer Johnson, Jessica Price? I didn't remember who got that first. I was letting somebody in.
Jeff, did you check it?
I was reading the question while you should have read.
Let's go with Roger was the first one to answer. Let's go with Jessica Price because she has yet to win. Lori and Jennifer were winners from the last session. Not discounting those ladies, but Jessica Price. Can you hear us?
You got it.
She typed it in, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice
Commissioner
work,
Filter.
Jessica.
And just to add on to that, you are correct. The specific mandate is obviously pitcher and filter within 24 hours, but it has to include 6 months of filtration.
Exactly. Yep.
So just there's a little bit of a clarifier and a way to maybe take a little bit more information home. Well done, Jessica.
All right, and then final question. So under the new revisions, you will have to be updating your service line inventory. At what rate will you have to update that service line inventory?
Austin Swan.
Oh, what great.
Austin Swan. Oh, he put 3% for 2 years?
So that is the replacement rate for
Sorry, yeah.
if you have if you get into a situation where you have to do a lead service line replacement, you have to do 3% for 2 years. So that is
Yes,
not
I can reword my question. How often will you have to update your service line inventory? Is what I was asking. So not replacing, but just updating it. Maybe.
Okay, and that would be Jennifer Johnston. Is that correct? 3 to 6 months?
The correct
Wow.
one was why I didn't see. Sorry. Yeah, I guess it was a trickier question. It was alongside your compliance testing. So alongside your annual compliance or triennial compliance. So it really was kind of more of a
Yeah, the
alongside
correct
compliance.
answer is, and maybe Jeff, if you want to do another one for clarification, but in this case, you have to update your inventory as it pertains to your compliance monitoring schedule.
Mhm.
So those that are doing, sampling twice a year, you're going to have to update your inventory twice a year. If you are in reduced monitoring and do it every 3 years, your inventory will need to be updated every 3 years. So tricky question. Do you have another one that we can do, Jeff?
Yes, we can do. Let's see here. I was like kind of trying to figure one out. Unless you have one, Lowell.
Trying to think.
How about here? We can do one.
Okay, everybody, here's the new question.
Let's see. Does a full service line replacement count as a full service line replacement if the customer does not allow you to replace their end?
Rhonda Barton.
That is correct.
There you go.
It has
Okay.
a full public and private line replacement to count towards your 3% in the event that you have to replace it. Well done.
Congratulations this round to Andrew Ferguson, Roger Ballou, Jessica Price, and Rhonda Barton. You are the winners of the $25 Amazon gift cards. Okay, now look at that. Cold hard cash.
That's what I was charged for my coffee this morning from my daughter. She gave the $1 to me, so I actually ended up ahead.
Hey, there you go. We'll go ahead and jump into your break, take a smoke, take a pee break, take a drink break, take a whatever break that you're going to be breaking. I do ask that everybody, if you have camera, if you have camera capabilities, turn your camera on. I'm going to get screenshots of each screen. And again, one more degree of grabbing verification for Missouri Department of Natural Resources that you attended today's session. It shouldn't take me forever, but while you have your screen on, go ahead, put your name and your certification number in the chat box. And again, we are going to be getting screenshots. So if you would just bear with me for a moment.
I love it. Wesley's running 2 screens. Awesome. Doug, you asked, as you guys are doing that, what do you do if a customer says no to a replacement? So a couple things here. One, you need to be able to document that you ask the customer, and depending on your state primacy, they may say you have to make X number of attempts. But I mean, in the event, there are some cases that I've heard, especially in other states, where they absolutely they will not let you on their property. And the primacy has just asked that they can prove that they've done basically everything within their power to get them to. Now, the other interesting part of this, now let's say the other side of the coin is the case where you have a resident that is highly engaged and they say, you know what, this freaks me out and I'm going to go ahead and I don't care. I'm not waiting for you to test. I'm replacing my line. The way the EPA has this written is if that a voluntary private line is done, you will have 45 days to replace yours once they notify you. Now, like in the state of Indiana, I'm heading to Maine later this month, and those places where we do get ground freeze, they do have a 180-day period where, if they notify you on December 1st, that they've replaced their line, 45 days from then, ground's going to be frozen. You can't do the replacement. But I just wanted to say that, there are cases where the opposite is true. It's not someone saying, I refuse to let you do it, but hey, I went ahead and did mine. The EPA is essentially saying that you have 45 days once notified to get yours done. Great question. Man, this is an awesome group. I love it. This is fantastic.
And thank you very much, Lori Perkins, and your whole group there to do a group selfie. I appreciate that. That helped. Same with Gary Morrison. Same with Richard Bodie. Yeah, I appreciate that. Helps keep track. Because we do, especially with digital technology and the kind of the freeness that it does give us all. It's that's one of those things that the better that we can document your attendance to these and prove it, then the more giving that Missouri Department of Natural Resources Operator Certification will be in letting us continue this type of training. And I think that is it on my end for the break.
What kind of music are we getting this time?
We are going to have some rock. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you back here around 11:30. Is that right, Lowell? Around 11:30?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
In about 15 minutes, we'll get moving again. Thank you all.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors, leading you down into my core? Will I become so numb without a soul? My spirit sleeping so long until you find wake me up inside, wake me up inside, call my name and save me from in my blood to rise, wake up before I come undone, save me from the nothing I've become. Wake me up inside, wake up, wake me up inside, call my name and save me from undone. In my blood to rise, wake up before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become.
For the broken hearted, a silent prayer for faith departed. Now you're gonna be just a face in the crowd. You're gonna hear my voice when I shout it out loud. It's my life, it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. One thing, I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind. I designed this rhyme to explain in due time. Oh, I know time is a valuable thing. Watch it fly by as the pendulum swings. Watch it count down to the end of the day. The clock takes life away. It's so unreal. Didn't look out below. Watch the time go right out the window. Trying to hold on to didn't even know I wasted it all just to watch you go. I kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to be will eventually be a memory of a time I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. One thing, I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind. I designed this rhyme to remind myself how I tried so hard. In spite of the way you were mocking me, acting like I was part of your property, remembering all the times you fought with me, I'm surprised it got so. Things aren't the way they were before. You wouldn't even recognize me anymore. Not that you knew me back then, but it all comes back to me in the end. You kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I put my trust in you. Pushed as far as I can go. For all this, there's only one thing you should know. I've put my trust in you. Pushed as far as I can go. For all this, there's only one thing you should know. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. Tired of being what you want me to be, feeling so faithless, lost under the surface. Don't know what you're expecting of me, but under the pressure of walking in your shoes, every step that I take is another mistake to you. Caught in the undertow, just caught in the undertow. I become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so tired, so much more aware. I'm becoming this. All I want to do is be more like me and be less like you. Can't you see that you're smothering me? Holding too tightly, afraid to lose control. 'Cause everything that you thought I would be has fallen apart right in front of you. Every step that I take is another mistake to you. And every second I waste is more than I can take. I become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so tired, so much more aware. I'm becoming this. All I want to do is be more like me
There we are. And Marcus, I'm going to do a sound check on you. Oh, let's see.
Andy, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Yes.
Loud and.
I think that was a little bit livelier break music than the first round.
Yeah, that was, yeah. If that was an elevator, that was a rocking elevator, man.
Before we come back, again, if you are in a watch party, I do ask that you put your name and your cert number all included from the watch party in the chat box. That way I know who's watching with whom, and we can keep track of your attendance that way. I think we're gonna get things rolling here in just a moment. When Marcus is ready and Lowell's ready, we'll jump right in. And one last question. I think it's Bob Drydale. You have your hand raised. I sent you a text and asked if you were wanting to ask a question or if you just intermittently hit the hand raise button.
It could also be him digitally smacking me, you know,
Ah,
like hand to the face.
gotcha.
I mean, we'll defer to him. All right. Well, welcome back. You all seem to be gluttons for punishment coming back for round 3. Again, thank you all today for being with us, diving into, you know, what really is a game changer in a lot of ways for how we are going to go about our compliance plans now and certainly in the near and in some cases distant future. So again, I told you, you know, the idea today was to identify some of the foundational components of what this law is asking and requiring us to do. Understanding obviously where there is some direct resource help, but also that this big, scary, very frustrating thing comes with a lot of resource and help. And I had mentioned that my colleague, Marcus Hagberg, who has done an absolutely wonderful job taking, again, you know, you thought, you know, federal legislation is complex, federal funding and mapping those paths is something completely different. But Marcus has done a great job trying to help us understand you know, what funding is out there. And again, we said, make sure we have a line of sight to those resources, whether they're internal, whether they're with your peers and your neighbors or neighboring utilities, in this case, to your state, local, and federal, you know, funding mechanisms. So without further ado, it is 12:30. Glad to see everybody back. I'll turn this over to Marcus to introduce himself briefly. And we, you know, I hope, you know, keep the questions coming. And we will make sure that we get those answered. But Marcus, go ahead and take it away. And thank you again for being here today.
Thanks, Lowell, for having me again. And Andy, great to meet you. Really appreciate the music and the introduction here with Missouri Rural Water Association. So my name is Marcus Hagberg. I'm an account manager with 120Water, serving 64 clients east of the Mississippi, as well as managing 87 programs with those clients. So I've been with 120Water for over a year now. My background is in working with government at the federal level, state and local government level over the last 10 years. So I'm really excited to be speaking to you guys less about my day-to-day as an account manager, more what I do when I moonlight. I got my background in public policy and economics. So when the bipartisan infrastructure law was going through Congress and then it was eventually passed and signed into law, that was a really exciting moment for this industry. So I'm going to actually have a different tact, a different approach here today. Still going through the lead and copper rule revisions, but mostly focusing on what are current avenues of available funding that my utility, my water system can access at the federal level as well as at the state level. And so this is very classroomy. Lowell and Jeff and I have been engaging throughout the day, and we appreciate your feedback as well. This is, I don't even know how many, what number of Rural Water Association presentations and trainings this has been, guys. You guys probably know the number better than me, but we're always looking to improve the programming to really meet your needs and get you the content that you want and answer those questions. So to Lowell's point, please put any and all questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that and hopefully we can get to them. But I do have a pretty hefty presentation. Again, this is very classroom style, and the slides are probably going to be the most boring, I would say. However, I hope to leave them as a takeaway for you guys after this meeting. You can refer to slides, click on links, go to the different funding programs. Heck, even look in the bipartisan infrastructure law yourself and read the text if you're so inclined, because I have put all the resources there for you. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get going here. And again, please let me know if you have any questions throughout. Just put them in the chat. 1 second here. Okay, Lowell, can you give me a confirmation you can see my screen?
We got you, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, so our agenda today is really looking at what's the current funding available to support your drinking water infrastructure. The bipartisan infrastructure law specifically provides a lot of fundings, not only for drinking water, but also clean water, wastewater, stormwater related infrastructure. Today's presentation is focused really on the drinking water infrastructure side of the house. So there is, though, that's just one thing to say, there's more funding available than what is showcased here today, especially if you have wastewater and stormwater infrastructure needs. But really I want to take us through some key components of different loans and grants available, some newer sources of funding that are maybe a bit more time bound, and leave with some key action items and a main takeaway, all within an hour. So again, we're focusing on how do I fund my drinking water infrastructure needs. You all know, you live through this day in, day out. There's been a backlog of investment in infrastructure, water infrastructure for decades. And thankfully, bipartisan infrastructure law is just one component of additional funding being made available to states and local governments to support meeting their drinking water infrastructure needs. It's not going to get us all the way there. Let's be fully blunt and transparent about that. However, it is a step in the right direction. And this is the largest investment in clean water ever that's been made. Looking at, if we're thinking about different funding sources, a great way to kind of bundle them together is kind of like understanding the different types of funding. First are government subsidized loans, second government grants, and the third are newer sources. Really, I broke them out these way because loans and grants will have different criteria, right? Loans, you have to pay back. There's usually interest rates on them and a payback period, whereas grants are much more time bound, but also do not necessarily accumulate interest and you don't have to pay them back. Newer sources, they take the form of both loans and grants. And I will just say as a caveat that even though I bucketed these as, government subsidized loans and government grants, many of these programs offer both grants and loans. So you're going to see, so it's really great to ask those questions of your regulator, based upon the different program, to see if that meets your needs there. And structurally, I'll be going through every single program here over the next few slides. And the slides will be structured very similarly, where we're going to do a deep dive in every particular program, really highlighting key components of such, and ultimately trying to leave you with kind of where do I go if I'm interested in this program, I want to learn more, I want to submit an application, what are some next steps I can take tangibly? So this slide gives you a general, broader overview of government subsidized loans, really focused on the state revolving funds, the SRFs, probably very familiar acronym with you all here, with FIA, as well as the Water and Waste Disposal Loan and Grant Program. So one of the most successful and proven vehicles for channeling funding to meet drinking water and clean water infrastructure needs have been the state revolving funds. They just celebrated their 30th year, I believe, of being effective funding vehicle here, and that's a federally funded loan program that's in partnership with state-based revolving funds or state SRFs. And so Missouri has an SRF. That next slide will actually speak really specifically to Missouri's SRF and kind of what are the criteria and programs available there. Usually this is a partnership between federal funding and matching state funding that can be used to meet various drinking water and clean water infrastructure needs. Drinking water SRF, again, we're focused primarily on drinking water infrastructure funding during this presentation. Drinking water SRF projects eligibility cover public health related water supply projects that address compliance related problems. So if you're having difficulty maintaining compliance, or if you're out of compliance and you're seeking to get back in, some funding is available to help you with that, as well as water conservation projects. These are offered at loans of a very low interest rate and with a maximum payback period of 40 years. Clean water is really focused on kind of sourcing and water quality, water conservation, as well as different infrastructure needs that are supporting your sewer and wastewater infrastructure. Again, very low interest rate with a maximum payback period of 30 years. But really what I want to get into is Missouri's SRF, because they actually have some really interesting stuff based upon my research. So Missouri gives priority to the 2 eligible projects that address most serious risks in human health and ensure compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. So everything can be tied back to the Safe Drinking Water Act from a drinking water perspective, as well as clean water perspective. They have these applications, at least the state revolving fund applications. They have applications open every year, and the deadline is March 1st. So it's coming up really, really fast. And as you can see that not only do you have to submit an application, you can see the application form at the bottom of the screen here, linked to such, but it needs to be accompanied by engineering report, facility plan, and other ways to show that you have the ability to take on that amount of debt and ultimately repay it. And one thing I should note about state revolving fund awards is that they take a long time. Just because this is a state program, although it is funded in part by the federal government, they take quite some time. So if you're looking to secure funding right away for your project, just know that if you're going through state mechanisms, if you're going through federal programs, it takes quite a long time. You can see that as evidenced, as Missouri outlined, it takes about 15 to 22 months from the application submittal before they can actually close on their SRF loan, right? So even if you submit your application by March 1st, you may not get the funds until 2023, mid 2023, right? So all that to say, if you are interested in this, it's something to really kind of pursue right here and now. Again, there will be more funding available next year, March 1st, 2023. But and every year thereafter, but just take that into account. From the SRF perspective, again, fixed rate loan with a standard interest rate, up to a 20-year repayment term, and it covers a wide variety of different projects that can help you meet your drinking water needs, from helping repairs and replacement of treatment plants, transmission, distribution mains, storage facilities. These are quite substantial and expensive infrastructure projects. Missouri SRF also has a small borrowers fund, which is really great. I think this is pertinent maybe to some of you that are here on the call today, but they have a program that's dedicated specifically to those systems that service 1,000 people, population of 1,000 or less. This is a direct loan for wastewater or drinking water system improvements, right? The project size is up to $100,000. So in terms of infrastructure spending, these are on the smaller side, but they offer up to a 20-year repayment term. And it covers a wide variety of different projects, from pumps, plant repairs, purchase of assets like a backup generator, et cetera. And there's an application form there. I did not see an application deadline on the small borrowers component here. So it may just be an open revolving door, specifically based upon the criteria of being a small borrower. Moving on to continuing the subsidized loan program is WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. Now, I included this here, even though it is typically airs toward very large infrastructure projects. You can see that the application fee alone, right, for small communities, which are defined as a population of 25,000 or under, or large communities, over 25,000 population is substantial. $25,000 just for the application fee, $100,000 for larger communities, and with minimum project sizes of the multi-millions. But this is a really great way to buttress long-term funding to meet a really regionally or nationally significant infrastructure need. And this is really great for longer term projects that are really capital intensive. And this program is designed specifically for them. It may not be as pertinent for folks on this call, but I just want to put it out there that it has been proven to be really substantial. You can actually go on their website and see the types of projects that have closed recently based upon the most recent round of funding. One thing that we have heard as well from folks who have gone through the process is a very how should I say, it's a very dense process, the application process for this. You actually partner very closely with the EPA on this, so they've been great support. However, it does require, it's very resource intensive in terms of human capital, in terms of obviously financial resources, but also they really dig into credit payback, technical due diligence, legal due diligence, et cetera, over quite a short time frame, 6 months. So keep that in mind if you're interested in getting going on this program and securing funding, that it is quite resource intensive. So make sure you are prepared for that if you want to pursue it. The last loan program that I'll talk about is through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. These are for rural areas and towns with populations of 10,000 people or less. And there is a contributing to the project, the applicant must contribute at least 20% to the overall project cost. And applications are accepted year round. You can file those applications directly with the USDA through their online application portal, RD Apply. I have it linked there. This is really for funding for clean and reliable drinking water systems, really touching everything around clean and drinking water to help support your system at large, but also households and businesses. Has a very long payback period, up to a 40-year payback period. So it's really exciting and obviously this program is targeting more rural areas or towns with smaller populations. It can be used for a wide variety of different projects, either the acquisition of assets, brand new construction, or improvement of existing assets from drinking water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. And there's even other circumstantial uses that if your entity qualifies for, you can even use it for those as well. Government grants. I'm excited to talk about this one too, because Missouri has been really active in securing a number of these WIN grants through the WIN Act to support utilities and water systems in the state of Missouri. So government grants, these are grant programs that are made available, which means that they do not have to be paid back, but they are time bound, usually a much shorter time period, definitely compared to the repayment timeframes in the loan agreements. But there's 3 specific programs I want to call out here, 2 of which are really pertinent for you all because the state of Missouri has actually secured funding for those programs. They are the Small and Disadvantaged Communities for Drinking Water and Lead Testing in School and Child Care program. So looking at these programs, we can see that I'm really going to focus on the top and the bottom programs because those are really pertinent to the audience here today, because the state of Missouri has actually secured grant funding from the EPA to roll out these programs across the state. So first program is Small, Underserved, and Disadvantaged Communities Grant Program. This provides grants to eligible entities. Those are usually rural populations of 10,000 people or below, to primary purposes to help those systems meet the requirements and stay in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And these can cover a wide range of different projects, from technical assistance to managerial, even financial capacity building, and really anything that is necessary to respond to the contaminant. In this case, it could be lead. So the state of Missouri has actually secured almost $500,000, $492,000 in grant funding to improve drinking water for residents in small towns and underserved communities. I have a link to the EPA press announcement. This was secured just announced as of December 2021. So this is very fresh, very new. And if this is something that is applicable to you all, I would reach out to the Missouri SRF folks and or your regional EPA rep to learn more information around how you can learn more about some of this funding to support you. And I've actually linked their contact information, both the EPA regional rep as well as your state SRF representatives at the very end of the presentation to help facilitate those interactions. The other program I want to speak to is the lead testing in school and childcare drinking water program. 120Water has a lot of experience with this program, working directly with state clients like Indiana, Wyoming, Minnesota, South Dakota, and just to name a few, and West Virginia, just to name a few. But really, this is a program that states apply to assist local and tribal educational agencies in supporting voluntary testing for lead contamination in drinking water at schools and childcare. So this has become a very popular program to get the lead out and help test for water quality in schools and daycares. And this is consistent with the EPA's 3 T's for reducing lead in drinking water in schools and childcare facilities guidance. The state of Missouri secured $719,000 in grant funding to help schools and childcare programs. So if your system is looking to support its schools and daycare facilities, and I'm sure Lowell and or Jeff may have spoken to this, but as a part of lead and copper rule revisions, you are on the hook to sample 20% of your elementary schools and daycares every year over a course of 5 years, getting up to that 100%. So this could be funding to help facilitate that sampling as well. So I would suggest reaching out to your state SRF rep and or EPA regional office contact to learn more about this, because this is funding that's available right now, and it could help you be in compliance, meet that requirement as per the LCRR. All right, so the newer sources of funding, I'm particularly excited about these because these are massive investments in clean and drinking water, and they're not going to be around forever. So I think it's really time bound, really critical to pay attention during these next few slides and learn more about these 2 particular acts that have now become law, and funding has started to be dispersed. So first is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds through the American Rescue Plan Act, and the other is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, commonly known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So first, I'll start off with the American Rescue Plan Act. They have a program specifically for to support state, county, local governments by giving money directly from the U.S. Treasury to those government entities. That's through a fund, the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. And that's a $350 billion fund to help state, county, local, and tribal governments address the economic challenges that they have grappled with and currently grapple with as a result of COVID. So one of the eligible uses of those funds is, and I quote, investments to improve access to clean drinking water, as well as wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. This is huge, right? So there's potentially a pot across the country of $350 billion being made available to all different entities. And one of the eligible uses for such is drinking water and clean water infrastructure investment, which is just fantastic for the industry. And if you're trying to think of like, well, what does that mean? Investments to improve access to clean drinking water. Really what it means is if you scroll back to earlier slide, looking at the drinking water SRF and the clean water SRF, I'll just jump back really quick. Really what that means is the criteria that has been outlined through the EPA as a part of the drinking water SRF and the clean water SRF, those are eligible projects that can be used to invest in. So that if you have any doubt around like, well, how can I use this money to meet my needs, refer to your Missouri SRF or Missouri SRF for the clean water, drinking water project eligibilities, and then that would be applicable funding to use ARPA dollars for. What is, I think, really exciting is that there's actually, that was part of the initial rule that eligible drinking water projects are eligible under the drinking water SRF and clean water SRF project criteria. That rule was announced in May of 2021. Just last week, the US Treasury announced its final rule. You can see that I put a link to it there, which actually makes even more projects eligible for funding through the use of ARPA dollars, which is just really great. So, and that includes a lot of the investments that are covered by the WIN Act grant. So that could be lead testing installation of corrosion control treatment, lead service line replacement, water quality testing, compliance monitoring, and lead remediation activities. So this is really critical, that the Treasury have expanded the eligible use of ARPA dollars to cover even more things related to clean and drinking water investments. And if you're wondering, like, well, how does this money be dispersed? Where can I get it? This slide actually speaks to it really clearly here. And funding is traditionally dispersed in two tranches. The first tranche of funding was sent to all, and it was made available to all government entities in the state of Missouri. So the state, all the counties, and every single city, whether, irrespective of the population, which are eligible to receive money. That money was made available as of May 2021. The second tranche, effectively the second half of this funding, is going to be dispersed in May 2022. So this slide really speaks to how has investments in ARPA impacted Missouri to date. So the state of Missouri will receive a total funding of let's round up, $2.7 billion are going directly to the state of Missouri, the state government. And the governor has actually announced its intent to use a portion of those ARPA dollars to make water infrastructure improvements. And the governor will be presenting that during the 2022 legislative session. And really, this will be made additional monies through grant programs for wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater infrastructure. So I put a link down to the governor's outline for what it means for water infrastructure. So in terms of next steps, I would keep really close tabs on your state representatives. And as the 2022 legislation session really continues, because the governor's outlined his plans to ensure that there's more funding being made available for the drinking water space and clean water, wastewater space. And again, it's part of the eligible use for the ARPA dollars. So definitely encourage your rep to vote yes for that, so you can maybe benefit. Counties. So county governments have also received money directly from the US Treasury. You can see a full Excel list from the Treasury on the second link. I actually really like this second link that I found, which is from the Missouri Budget Project. It's a great visualization of the amount of money each county government received, and it's kind of in a map format. So you can find your county by hovering over it. It tells you how much your county government has received in terms of money. Again, one of the eligible uses for ARPA dollar funds is investments in drinking and clean water, right? So if your county government has not clearly indicated how they intend to use ARPA dollars, I would reach out to the council, reach out to the county manager, get some more information from them as to how they intend to use that ARPA dollars. Are they potentially going to make investments in drinking water and clean water? How can that benefit your system? And one thing that has been that actually the governor has said, Governor Missouri has said, is that they encourage the funds that have been received at the county and local government to kind of hold on those so that they can actually use some of those funds to match state grants that they may get from the state of Missouri. Lastly, non-entitlement entities. There's a total funding of $450 million that is going to be dispersed to non-entitlement entities. These are populations with less than 50,000 people, government entities, local government entities. So you can see a full, and this is money that's not being sent directly from the US Treasury to local government. It actually is made available to the state of Missouri, and your local government representative, your local government mayor, town council, et cetera, needs to actually engage the state of Missouri, who manages that $450 million funds, to actually request your allotment. So you can see a link to the full distributions of states to the state of Missouri there.
Hey, Marcus, just real quick, thank you. Yeah, and I will echo your plea to engage your state, local, and county authorities. Like, again, there's bandwidth and funding like we haven't seen in quite some time. So understanding the nuance and who and where those things are key. We did have a question from Dale. He said, so what if they build a school or a daycare and let's say 2023, do we have to test that for 5 years? The way I understand the law is only K-8 schools built before 2014. Can you confirm that, Marcus?
Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah. So if you had a school that was built, let's say in 2020, then that school would be would not necessarily need to have required testing. It's only
Now-
if the facility is built before 2014.
Now, the way I understand it, Dale, so let's say that, you know, you are testing the schools, say, built in the 1990s, and a parent or a group requests that a new school is tested. I believe the law says that you have to consider and comply with those requests. So it doesn't mean that, you know, by law, out of the box, those are excluded from testing. But the legislation does, you know, require that you know, take those requests into consideration. And, you know, in many cases, when we talked about communications, you know, are you really going to want to say no? Or can you? I don't know that legal, from a legal standpoint, what that is, but just a thought.
That's a good question. Very particular, and especially as we just covered some of the funding that the state of Missouri secured from the EPA to support sampling in schools.
Well, thank you, Marcus, and please continue to march forward, and appreciate, again, you've done an incredible job breaking this stuff down and hopefully digestible chunks.
Hopefully. And I want to apologize in advance because these next few slides are a doozy. They really go deep into the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the remaining slides of this presentation before the action items and main takeaway are all about the recently signed into law bipartisan infrastructure law. So what is the bipartisan infrastructure law? It's a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package that focuses a lot on just the hard infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, water systems, you name it. 55 billion of that $1.2 trillion is specifically allotted to support drinking water and wastewater infrastructure investments. Again, this is in addition to ARPA dollars that we already looked at the previous slide. So $2.7 billion from the state of Missouri received, $1.2 billion that Missouri counties received, and even more, you know, almost half a billion dollars in from smaller communities that they've received. This is in addition to that money that's already been made available, right? And its eligible uses are for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. And there's a heavy focus in the bipartisan infrastructure law that is focused on the removal and replacement of lead service lines and remediation of other contaminants, specifically PFAS. And funding is made available for communities of all sizes and geographies, and really covers a wide gamut of actual assets that you own and you manage as a system, but also entities that are serviced by your system, right? Households, businesses, schools, childcare facilities. So these next few slides will give you an overview of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then I'm actually going to go kind of program by program as the law has been written, and kind of really point out the programs that I think are really most applicable to this crew here today. So the bipartisan infrastructure law overview is really about SRF reauthorization. We already talked about what the SRF funding vehicle is, and in the state of Missouri, how it functions. Even more money is being made available to the SRFs, especially over the next 5 fiscal years. So, and you can see that this is the total amount of money that the federal government is making available as $2.4 billion across all the SRFs in the country, and then next year even more and more. So that's great. That means a re-upping and effectively reauthorization to a massive degree, funding for drinking water and clean water infrastructure investments through vehicles that have been proven to distribute the money most effectively. As a part of that, there's also this much more preference for procurement of domestic requirements, American iron and steel, and American manufactured products. As the law's title states, it's not just about ensuring infrastructure, it's about ensuring job creation as well. So there's a direct tie there between, there is a preference for using American manufactured products or American iron and steel products in your construction. Another overview slide of the bipartisan infrastructure law is targeted funding. So in addition to the reauthorization of the state revolving funds, there's more monies that have been made available specifically to support other drinking water and clean water priorities, specifically lead remediation and emerging contaminants. So this is everything, all these dollar figures you see here, which are probably a bit overwhelming, are in addition to what was just shared here. So in fiscal year 2022, $2.4 billion is being made available to the drinking water and the clean water SRFs respectively. An additional $1.9 billion is being made available to drinking water and clean water SRFs as well. So even more money is being made available to support drinking water and clean water infrastructure needs. Now, there are dedicated funds through the drinking water SRF in particular for lead remediation. So if you have confirmed lead, or you want to replace some pipes that have confirmed lead, there's a really big focus on getting the lead out. You probably have heard about it quite a bit, and there's actually a particular bucket of funds, $3 billion per year over the next 5 fiscal years, specifically to support lead remediation. And in December 2021, the EPA gave an update on the disbursement of SRF funds to states. The state of Missouri has received $147 million from that $2.4 billion bucket. And the EPA really encourages the money to go to a few things. First is to target funds to communities who've been disproportionately impacted by lead in drinking water, accelerate the development and use of lead service line inventories, which is a foundational component and requirement of the lead and copper rule revisions, and to start to reduce the risk of people exposed exposed to PFAS and other contaminants in drinking water. So the state of Missouri has received $147 million through their SRF function that we covered earlier for this next fiscal year. And the EPA has encouraged priority of getting the lead out, focusing on those communities that have been impacted by lead, accelerate the development of lead service line inventories, and PFAS as well. So these next few slides, and I want to be really granular here because throwing out these very large numbers is overwhelming for me. I actually wanted to go program by program to better understand kind of how funds, what type of funding is being made available in addition to what has just been spoken about, right? And so these are different programs that have either been established by the EPA or are intended to be established to support systems with population of 10,000 people or under. So I really culled through the bipartisan infrastructure law, pulled these out here. If you are really interested in reading the text verbatim, I actually put down the bipartisan infrastructure law pages there, so you can reference those pages and go to those pages to read more about these specific programs. The first would be the technical assistance to small public water systems. So this is the administrator, being the EPA. They have a grant program that will provide technical assistance to small systems, those systems serving 10,000 people or less, to enable them to achieve and maintain compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. So these applications generally open in the fall. So for example, the most recent round of applications opened in October 2021 and closed 60 days later, and awards are issued in the spring. So this is something to keep in mind that although 2021 round has closed, you know that there's technical assistance for small public water systems going to kind of open up in a competitive application process format in October 2022. So that's something to keep in mind. And as you can see, this it's significantly faster in terms of securing the award and associated funding than some of the other mechanisms we had outlined. So this is a program if you're looking to from some technical assistance for some funding from the EPA to help you either maintain or get into compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act or the lead and copper rule revisions. This could be a great avenue that's being made available. There's $15 million being allocated every single year to support this. And this is nationwide too. So this is a competitive application process, not just for folks in Missouri, but across the country. This section really focuses on the assistance for small and disadvantaged communities. They The EPA defines that as those with populations of 10,000 people or less, and disadvantaged being those serviced by a water system that violates or exceeds the requirement of the Safe Drinking Water Act, or in this case, the lead and copper rule, right? So that could be a violation that you've received as part of your LCRR compliance event, as an example. So this is an additional program that will be established to provide grants to entities to carry out projects that help them get into compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act and the LCRR. One thing that I will note is that the actual program itself didn't substantially change, which is great. So it still provides investments necessary to comply with Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, provides benefits specifically for disadvantaged communities, as well as household water quality testing and testing for unrelated contaminants. They've actually added onto that program, expanded the eligible uses for those funds to include point of entry or point of use filters or filtration systems, as well as these funds can be used to replace lead service lines or other sources of lead from water. So this is a common theme you'll see over the next few slides is in many cases, if the program has been established, they've really just broadened the eligible uses for those funds to include specifically kind of lead remediation actions or just ensuring water quality. Drinking water infrastructure resilience and sustainability. This is really focused on the kind of physical resilience of your system. When I say physical resilience, it really is like resilience to natural hazards. So that could be extreme weather events, that could be flooding, that could be kind of water source conservation that will be used as well. This really wants to ensure that, your facility, your system is resilient to shocks that may occur. I think a prime example that we saw earlier, actually this time last year, was the deep freeze down in Texas and how that really impacted the water systems. The water systems were not built to withstand below freezing temperatures. That impacted the system's ability to handle a shock like that. So this program is established to help those facilities and the systems better address physical natural hazards that occur, extreme weather events, flooding, maybe even sustainability, energy efficiency of your systems as well. You can see some examples of different project eligibilities there. This is a new program that will be set up, and you're going to see that whenever it's a new program that's going to be set up, that means it will probably take some time for the government to design the program, ultimately solicit feedback, and then roll it out. So although money has been allocated this fiscal year for this program, state competitive grants for underserved communities, the program is still being designed, and we don't have many other details beyond what is provided here. But really, this is ensuring that a competitive grant program will be established, and states will benefit. States need to actually apply for this type of funding to support communities that are defined as underserved. Underserved being have either been in a violation or just have an inadequate system for obtaining drinking water. So again, a lot of these, especially if it's funding directly for the state, you may not think, oh, well, what can my water system or utility do? That's a great moment to lean on the Missouri Rural Water Association, who has those connections, who is your vehicle to actually have your voice heard for the state of Missouri when they're looking to potentially get some funding for this type of work. Reducing lead in drinking water. Again, this has been an established program, and the funding has been continued for it at $100 million per fiscal year. And I really want to call out the changes, and that's what you see in red and green here. And this is really around getting the lead out, like actual remediation of lead. Some big changes have occurred as a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that are consistent with the lead and copper rule revisions. So you may have seen that instead of the replacement of publicly owned, so utility-owned lead service lines, it actually wipes the publicly owned out. It actually removes the publicly owned out of there and said this can now just be used for the replacement of lead service lines, both publicly owned and privately owned, which is part of the LCRR, is really ensuring that there's full line replacements, no partial lead service line replacement, not eligible for that. This also provides assistance to eligible entities to replace lead service lines, full replacements. So specifically targeting disadvantaged communities based upon affordability criteria that are established by the state. Again, you may see that there's additional language has been added, specifically of the full replacement of lead service lines on both the publicly owned and private side at no cost to homeowner as well. So there are funds being made available to support what was pretty crystal clear in the lead and copper rule revisions around full replacement of lead service lines, and that there's very little distinction now between publicly owned and privately owned side of the line. This is a new grant program that has yet to be established, but this is Lead Inventory and Utilization Grant Pilot Program. And this really focuses on helping those systems that need a lead inventory, and we all need a lead inventory irrespective of our system size by October 16th, 2024. There's funds that are being made available to help your system get the right data, have the right technology to be able to better have your lead service line inventory, right? This will be an application-based program that with preference given to systems that can demonstrate affordability criteria. And as this program does not yet exist, it's still being designed. And us at 120Water, we're going to keep our eyes on to see, when more information comes out, we can be able to easily share it as well. But again, this is very much in line and in support of your lead and copper rule requirement to develop a lead service line inventory by October 16th, 2024. Operational sustainability for small public water systems. This is focused on, again, smaller systems, less than 10,000 population, but this is really, again, to support technology acquisition and operational efficiency with regard to, could be including your inventory as a part of the LCRR, right? So funds can be used for the development of a detailed asset inventory. So think mains, meters, service lines, other assets that you may have, as well as an infrastructure asset map, a geospatial map. And as per the LCRR, you have to have a location-based inventory, right? So having a technology solution, a software that can geospatially map your assets or a location-based system as per the LCRR is really critical. This is funding that's being made available to specifically for smaller systems, less than 10,000 population, to facilitate the acquisition of technology and software to help you meet that requirement as per the LCRR. But it cannot just be used for your inventory. As you can see there, there's other different ways you can leverage this to support other operational efficiency needs, metering technology, leak detection technology, etc. These are for larger systems. So if you have a population of more than 10,000, but less than 100,000, this could be really pertinent for you. This really is focused on resilience as well, both to natural hazards as well as kind of man-made hazards like cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So this is very similar to the other resilience and sustainability program for smaller systems, but for mid-size and large systems. Covers everything like natural hazards like flooding, excess heat, facility energy efficiency, but also kind of bolstering your cyber resiliency when it comes to protecting your data, protecting your systems from nefarious threats that could impact your operations. This program is specifically is going to be developed, so we'll keep our eyes on it, but there is a program that's specifically developed for rural and low-income water assistance pilot program 40 grants will be made available based upon the system size population ranges you see there. And they have until November of 2023 to establish this pilot program and award these grants. So over the next 2 years, we'll be sure to keep tabs on this. This is specifically to assist qualifying households in maintaining access to quality drinking water and wastewater treatment. So really focused on low-income assistance for folks in your population. One of the last ones one of the last programs I think is worth calling out before I actually go into action items and main takeaway, and then open the floor for questions, is lead contamination in school drinking water. Again, more money. The state of Missouri's already secured funding for this, $719,000, I believe. And so you should encourage, there's definitely an opportunity for your system to leverage that to support your schools that are serviced by your system. This is in line with your LCRR requirement to offer sampling to elementary schools and daycare facilities. So it could be a great way to leverage that. Advanced drinking water technologies. These are for systems with not over 100,000 people, so generally mid-sized to smaller systems. But this is really a competitive grant program that's application-based that encourages the adoption of different technology to support your operations, right? That could be helping you build your inventory. That could be something around smart metering or having a GIS system, things like this. Ultimately, we want to help ensure that these technology investments will improve your cybersecurity, reduce those cybersecurity vulnerabilities, but also can enhance other operational elements that are under your remit, such as treatment, monitoring, efficiency, and safety of the drinking water. All right, I've been up on the podium talking for a long time. I only have like 2 more slides, and I'm going to open it up to you all for some questions and/or turn it over to Lowell and Andy for some comments here. But some action items to take away. If there's nothing that you had, if you fell asleep for the last 40 minutes, 50 minutes, I think these next 2 slides are really important for you to just to be aware of. There's some 3 action items I'd like for you guys to take home with from today. First is understand your LCRR readiness. I'm sure Lowell spoke to this and some of my other colleagues, but LCRR is here. It's effective as of December 16th, 2021. You have until October 16th, 2024, when it actually will start to be enforced, which means violations, which means other penalties that could be put on your system, right? First is to understand, how are you as a system prepared for LCRR? There's current funding that's available, right? We just went through literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of funding that's made available to support projects that can help you get into compliance with the LCRR. However, if you're not prepared to be able to apply for those grants, secure those loans, have the right information at hand, then it's very competitive, right? So making sure you understand where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, as per LCRR, is a really great starting point. So there's 120Water has 2 things. We have a quiz, a self-assessment quiz you can take to kind of judge yourself. We're also offering until January 31st a one-on-one planning session based upon your LCRR preparedness. So I'd say take advantage of it. Can't hurt to have a phone call or fill out a quiz and see what your results are, just to better understand where you stand as per LCRR. Second, I would say is start early, right? We gave an example of the SRF, how it takes anywhere from 15 to 22 months to actually get the loan. The average drinking water SRF project takes 3.5 years. And with the enforcement date of October 16, 2024, you got to start early in terms of getting work done, securing funding, and ultimately expedite project implementation. Lastly, I would say stay up to date. There's a lot of great players that are providing great information to you, such as Missouri Rural Water Association. Sign up for the newsletters, continue to go to the trainings and webinars, learn as much as you can. With specifically regard to the American Rescue Plan Act funds, engage your local county or local government authorities. Understand what's their intended use for those ARPA funds. ARPA funds will not be made available forever. So, and the next tranche is expected to drop in May 2022. So reach out to the counties, reach out to your local government authorities, understand what their priorities are, and hopefully advocate for drinking and wastewater infrastructure funding. Another one would be engage your state drinking water SRF contacts. Their phone numbers and their email addresses are listed in the EPA's webpage. So get on the phones, talk to them, ask them how you can benefit from some of the Missouri programs that we outlined earlier. And lastly, I would say keep engaged with your regional EPA office, which is based out of Kansas City. And they are going to be your great local resource for everything related to the bipartisan infrastructure law, the lead and copper rule revisions, as well as kind of what's going on in your region. Ultimately, main takeaway, these next 5 years are really critical for your utility water system to, build partnerships with the relevant state authorities and federal agency programs to secure funding to advance your drinking water and wastewater infrastructure priorities. I'd like to give a big shout out, thank you to Missouri Rural Water Association for inviting myself and 120Water to talk through this exciting moment in water. And with that, I will I'll stop sharing my screen and turn the floor over to questions.
Here's the part where you guys type in the chat box.
And thank you, Marcus. We appreciate, again, sifting through literally thousands of pages, trying to figure out how all this maps to what is being asked of systems. So again, I know we threw a lot at you today. And we appreciate you sitting and going through with us today. You will receive all of this, and we'll get that sent out to you through Andy and team. But if you do have any questions, please reach out, whether it's through the association or to us. And as Marcus said, please, this is the best time you all can be reaching out to your state and local authorities, picking up the phone, having the conversation. There's a lot more help, I think, than we realize at the moment. I'm trying to see if there's any questions.
And Lowell, I don't know if you provide our email addresses, but please feel free to share my direct email address with folks on the line too. Happy to answer any very specific questions they may have.
Yeah, I know there were some questions earlier about lead paint on water towers and so forth. If you have that sort of stuff, again, we will give you all the contact information so that you guys can, ask us questions. If we don't know them, we'll chase them down for you, and hope that you do, send us those questions. We want to help you all get your heads and arms around everything, the problem, the funding, the resources, all of it.
Bradley Bryant, there are probably numerous people on staff. I would, like I'd said before, more than likely Liz, being the management circuit rider, and then our new staff, Amy Diekman. Those two for sure. And then I'm sure there'll be others as well. And EPA, Mark Klaus, and for other MRWA staff, just keep posted as that information kind of flowers out. I will make sure to include that in our e-news updates.
And then Andrew asked, yes, we will be emailing these to you. Jeff, I don't know if you and Andy want to kind of circle up and figure out if we can compile everything and have it sent out by their team. But yes, those will be emailed in some form or fashion here soon, and hopefully a recording. I know this is a lot, but if anything else, for the music, the recording will be sent out for everybody. And Andy, if you want to confirm on the number of credit hours for this training.
Yes, the number of credit hours for today is 3.0 for drinking water treatment, 3.0 for drinking water distribution.
All right, folks. Well, thank you. You're all troopers. Appreciate all the work that you do day in, day out to keep all your residents and customers safe. Have a great week, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Much appreciated to 120Water for their time today, and If those of you are looking for more of the virtual training hours to get so you don't have to leave your system, feel free to check out our training calendar at MRWA.org. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.
Thanks.